to the main funding for the major parts of the projects, and it's all part of a long chain. And I'd like to look at that as to what special financing schemes are being offered, why they're being offered, and what real benefit they bring. So, Eob, perhaps you'd like to make your opening statement and set the scene as you see it in East Africa, please.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, nice to be back and reconnect with the geothermal family. With that, let me start about the innovative financing schemes in Africa. So, first and foremost, where are we on the geothermal front? Kenya is in the lead with currently 23 megawatts of installed geothermal capacity. Most of this capacity was developed and installed with successful private sector financings and participation. You know, I think we need to give a good round of applause for KNGen and KPLC for this major achievement, which is really a landmark on the continent. Having said that, where are we today on the financing front? You know, when you look at financings, you have to balance two things. First, are tariffs affordable? And two, are there acceptable risk-adjusted debt and equity returns? Because equity participants will come in, take the risk developing the resource and want to put up the power, sell the power, and make an acceptable return to their capital. There's a cost of capital involved, and debt has to cover its cost of capital and earn some acceptable interest. So in the whole scheme of things, this is a balancing act that goes together. You know, assignment of risk, pricing of risk, and then, accepting that balancing act. Talking about that, let's take two practical and innovative financing happening today in Kenya and Ethiopia. First, the Menengai in Kenya, and second, Tulumoye in Ethiopia. When it comes to the innovative financing approach at Menengai, the Geothermal Development Corporation was established to assume resource risk and sell steam for power conversion. So basically, all the resource side risk is absorbed by the GDC, and GDC will sell power to a private developer who has to install the power conversion equipment and manage that, running the power plant and sell electricity at an agreed upon tariff. There are pros and cons here. The pros, the de-risking of the resource is attractive to private developers. There's a price for steam to cover resource development costs, and there's a tariff for power conversion acceptable by private developers. So 3 35 megawatts facilities have been, contracted out to 3 different parties. However, it's taken way too long in closing these transactions. TDB, the bank I work with, is part of the financing group for the QPA first 35 megawatts. We hope we can close the deal before year end. We've always saying we're closing it, but it's taken long. So what are the cons here? There were initial delays in resource confirmation, which caused a lot of confusion. It's taken a lot of time to properly align contractual structures between GDC's PISA and the developers' KPA and the PPA. There have been some conflicting regulatory interpretations surrounding land use under the forestry management for power generation, which added to the delay. And despite a very innovative financing mechanism, the long delays to reach financial close are negatively impacting the equity returns and causing deal fatigue. So, in the world of finance, time kills deals. If these transactions take too long, there will be deal fatigue, there will be negative signals sent out to the market, the model is not working, and it will be a real shame not to succeed on this front. I think this is a very innovative financing, and we have to do all our very best to get these projects across the finish line and generate the power. I think once GDC succeeds to demonstrate these successful power plants, it can then replicate the model across other geothermal fields. Then on Tulumoye. So Tulumoye is a whole different one. It's a greenfield type approach where the government granted concessions for developers to develop the whole resource across the whole value chain. That's from early stage exploration through the confirmation drilling, resource confirmation, and then financial close and building the power plant. So this model, has been accepted by the private sector. I applaud parties like Meridiam who've come in and taken the equity risk to develop the resource and are currently undergoing drilling. So, and the private party is being assisted with funds from the Geothermal Risk Mitigation Facility, grants from DFIs enabling the developer to de-risk and define the resource. Hopefully the resource will be certified with the success of the plant first 3 wells, because, that's the critical, path in this value chain. If the resource is confirmed within budget and within the timeline, then there's ease in the financing, transactions that come thereafter. The PPA renegotiation has also allowed to reach an acceptable balance with returns and tariffs, so that's a good thing. The PPA has been signed, an implementation agreement with the government of Ethiopia is backing it, and I think the contracts are about to reach effectiveness, which is great news. So there are some issues surrounding legality as to whether the PPP law has to grant funds as the PP and so forth, but I think those are minor issues in the whole scheme of things. So I think, Kenya is clearly in the advance. It has a proven model. It has an innovative model, which it is testing. And Ethiopia has come across with the, concessional model where the private sector will assume the risk and go for it. So what's happening in the larger scheme of power financing these days? Because of governments wanting to reduce tariffs, they're going the auction route. So they're coming with a pricing where they're coming with structures whereby they want firms to compete on tariffs based on a standardized PPA and standardized, contractual model. So I don't know when and if that model will come to geothermal, but we're seeing great success on reduction of tariffs across the board in the solar space and gradually within the wind space as well. So sooner or later, that might be the way forward, coming to knocking on the geothermal, space. We'll wait for that to happen. Finally, let me talk about what TDB's role is in all of this. TDB is a development financial institution operating in 22 countries across Eastern and Southern Africa and within the Indian Ocean Islands. It's been financing power projects, both renewable and conventional, for the past many years. And now there's a real refocused effort to support renewable energy and green finance development on a higher scale. So to enable that effort, TDB has recently, in the past couple of months, secured over $500 million USD to meet green and renewable infrastructure. So there's one regional infrastructure financing facility that is supported by the World Bank to finance green and renewable energy projects, which will cover long-term infrastructure projects, renewables. Then it also provides concessional technical assistance and credit support to developers, and it will facilitate access to debt financing to small and medium enterprises, primarily targeting renewable energy. So with that, we intend to support small and medium enterprises in the off-grid energy sector, as well as in the broader infrastructure value chain. And then there is another green infrastructure facility with $150 million from the French development agency, AFD, to finance climate-friendly projects in infrastructure, which promote efforts to reduce or limit greenhouse gas emissions, enhance greenhouse gas sequestrations, or support adaptation projects and various sectoral activities. So, TDB has that dry powder now ready to be, parceled out to projects that are bankable, that meet the criteria for, bankability and financing. And we're looking forward to engage with the developers, promoters, and others who need access to financing. One of the big items always raised about difficulties in undertaking projects in Africa is access to finance, and here we have a solution for it. So developers, please knock on our doors. With that, thank you, and I'll entertain any questions as the panel goes along. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eob, for that introduction. I'd like to keep going given that we have relatively short time. And Ellen, with your connection to the World Bank and your experience in SMAP, obviously we're well aware of the World Bank's support for perhaps the major phase of developments, but you have some recent experience, I believe, in the early sort of risky areas of exploration, particularly in Indonesia. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and that sort of risk mitigation model that you're pushing. Can you unmute, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike, and thank you for the opportunity to participate at the Argeo. Since 2013, the bank has been shifting its focus from the upstream support to downstream support in geothermal projects. And today we support de-risking schemes in several countries. I would like to mention two risking schemes, two risking projects that we are currently, one is in progress and one is in the final stage of the implementation, which are in Turkey and Indonesia. Both of these schemes are supporting public and private companies which can apply for risk sharing for the explorational drilling. For both of these facilities also, we agree on a success rate before drilling is commenced. And if wells are deemed unsuccessful, the loans are changed to grants. Whereas if the wells are successful, the loans are paid back with predefined terms. The bank also loans to individual projects, more often for drilling, but also for construction. But I would also like to mention that IFC has started to shift its focus to upstream development in the private market, and their goal for renewable energy is to create a portfolio of projects where they provide support in various forms to share the risk and accelerate development. So I will keep that short for now and wait for questions. Thank you.
Did you want to comment a little bit about the Indonesian model that the bank has been doing?
Yeah, the Indonesian model is that there is set up a fund where both private and public companies can apply to risk sharing. And as I mentioned, there are successful criteria where if the drilling is successful, it will be loans which they will pay back. Whereas if the resource exploration is unsuccessful, it will be a grant. Usually it is it depends on if you're a private or public sector company, but it can be up to 60% of the initial investment.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those comments. Michael Andres, are you available on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Paul from ADB. Yeah.
So I'd like to go down the list if I may. So Michael, are you available?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Michael from KfW. Yeah, I'm available.
Oh, okay. Please carry on.
Thank you that you're there. I think, Michael, a number of us are obviously aware of the GRMF, and obviously it overlaps with some of the things that Ellen has talked about. But maybe could you talk about how you see the success of the GRMF and the role that it's been able to play in East Africa?
Okay, yes. I think GMF, I think probably everybody's aware who's dealing with geothermal energy in Africa. So I don't want to go in too much in details. In principle, I would say, yes, it's a rather a success story, and we see a huge demand, I think, for our product. So we now have, I think, finished a 6th application round, where again, 18 developers applied for. Currently, we have a portfolio of more than 30 projects. So, and I think just the grant volume, requested for is more than 120 million USD. So you see, I think there's on the market side, I would say yes, it's the right product. You see, there's huge demand, so it fits. The only issue what I see it's by itself okay. Sometimes with the speed of the GMF itself, so it's always I think room for getting a better or faster operational performance. But I think the greatest challenge what we experienced is really in the market itself, and then it comes, I think, the examples what provided in the beginning, like Tulumuya or Menengai, you already see what is the problem. The problem is sometimes not just the money. Even if you have the money, the problem is the regulation. There's the red tape, there's the bureaucracy. So that are the issues, I think, what we see. And then if I compare the demand of the GMF and the disbursement of the GMF, then I see the gap is founded because of the regulation, I would say.
So, Michael, can you comment a little bit about, obviously, regulation's an issue, but my perception is also there's a challenge in terms of the equity that developers can bring. So how do you balance that? Because historically, the GRMF had made many commitments, but it was often difficult for the developers to bring the matching funding, or have you now got beyond that point?
I would say my experience is, of course, it's always difficult to bring funding in projects in Africa, in particular when it comes to equity. But I would say my experience is, as you see, for instance, with the Tulumuya or with Kobeti and other projects, if you have a good project, I think you will get the funding. And maybe sometimes you have to downscale a little bit your project and to start with this, I think, a lower scope. But I would say there's a lot of funding around. The problem is sometimes the perception of the investors, because they're seeing there's a risk of like regulations, and the speed of the implementation of the project. And nobody can invest something and wait for 5 years to get a PPA ratified. I think that usually there I would see more the problems. But of course, you're right. It could always be better to have a little bit more equity and some more funds available.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We'll come back to you shortly. Philippe, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the geo-risk activity and the differentiation. I guess it has an insurance base rather than a pure funding base. Could you amplify that, please?
Thanks for giving me the floor, and good morning, everybody from Europe. Indeed, what we are trying to do in Europe is to compare a bit the different situation between countries a bit more developed but more mature and some less mature. So we do this panorama to map all the risk and to see why some funding and some risk insurance schemes have been successful and some of us not successful. And according to what we have seen, the main criteria was the market maturity. What we heard from Eileen is that indeed there's a trend to go from typically pure grants to a kind of hybridized and innovative grants, repayable grants, convertible grants. But also what we have seen really successfully, in particular in Netherlands, for providing geothermal project to greenhouses, or in France for geothermal district heating, so more for heating project, what this kind of public-private risk insurance, where indeed the private developer is also contributing with a low premium to the fund. And why we see them successful is because with a low grant at the start of the project to launch the project, we have seen 30 years of operation of such a system. And with more than 30 geothermal district heating in France and more than 20 projects in Netherlands. So we see really that as a future. So what we are trying to investigate is that how we can have much more this kind of insurance. So we'd like to design that in Europe, and we'd like to see how we can replicate that in Africa, in South America, but also why not in other parts of the world. So indeed, the idea is how we can better design the risk mitigation schemes according to market maturity. And of course, here we go beyond just electricity projects. What we have heard this morning was mainly about electricity. We'd like also to develop much more heating and cooling projects. And one lesson we can learn and we can discuss about how much the examples and the success we have seen in Kenya could be rightly replicated elsewhere in Africa. Because we see different conditions, not only about geology, but also we speak about the market conditions. So it's all about that, how you can have a transition within a country between a pure grant to a public-private risk insurance schemes, and secondly, how you can replicate that in countries where you don't have such a maturity in the market development.
Obviously, if you're in Europe, you're tending to do projects that are probably shorter duration than, say, a major geothermal development in East Africa. Is that of importance? And also you have a large number of perhaps projects that you can aggregate in terms of the insurance risks. So how do you see that when you might come to Africa where fewer projects, longer duration?
Indeed. The key principle of insurance is mutualization of the risk. So you need to have a basket of projects, as you mentioned. So indeed, it will be that. But it's why we need to see beyond just electricity project, but also to looking heating and cooling project. We see that one focus of this conference is to see how we can have develop agri-food industry, how we can have different applications, and with that you will have a basket of projects, and you can better mutualize your risk.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to you shortly. Julian, I wonder if I could bring you in now, Julian Richardson from GeoFuture, and talk about your approach in East Africa, which builds a little bit on what Philippe has been saying, but I think you're taking the insurance approach to sort of a larger scale project early on. Thank you.
Yeah, hi Mike, thanks very much. Yeah, so we are insurance guys, and we are looking to bring insurance capital to East Africa and the geothermal sector there, and indeed into the wider geothermal sector. We do believe insurance has a really important role to play in de-risking the development drilling phase of the project. Insurance is not here to sort of replace equity. It is to support the deployment of other forms of capital, principally debt and equity. And in East Africa, the project types are very different to those that you find in Europe. In Europe, you predominantly have sedimentary type, low enthalpy projects where you have very limited number of wells per project. Often it's just 2 wells per project. And those lower enthalpy projects have very different risk profiles to that which we see in East Africa. So whilst I agree with Philippe that insurance has a role to play and mutualization is a fundamental principle of insurance, actually what we're looking at is using the aggregate well output from a multiple development drilling wells. And that's a way you can then put a floor on the downside from an agreed drilling campaign to support the equity investors. Equity typically sees breaking even as a and risk of significant capital impairment is fundamentally unacceptable. And until you've really, not only have you identified the resource through exploratory drilling, but fully defined it through the development drilling, you still have a significant amount of risk for equity investors to take. And you can end up with, a significant capital impairment event. And that's where insurance has a role to play, because insurance's risk appetite is about those low probability, high impact events. And so using insurance capital to put that floor on the downside from a multi-well drilling program is an appropriate position for insurance capital to play and to support equity investment.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to you shortly, I'm sure. Alamehu, I wonder if I could ask you to comment a little bit about the activity of the African Development Bank and the role that it's been playing in geothermal, and if you have a product that you think is specific to the market that is innovative and new.
So, Mike, and good morning, everyone. I want to focus quickly on first the African Development Bank experience in financing for de-risking the geothermal exploration activity. Secondly, the bank support to both off-taker and the private sector developers. And thirdly, the available and the planned innovative financing products designed for geothermal development. As you know, the African Development Bank, like other multilateral development banks, its role at early stage geothermal development is to provide financing for de-risking the geothermal exploration, which is known as upfront fee or drilling risk. Upfront risk or drilling risk. So why we finance geothermal drilling? Well, the African Development Bank support in most of the cases is to assist the government to take the upfront risks by providing several, multiplicity of its available financing products, and also to the government or the utility, to do the drilling and avail the steam to private developer. So this is what we are doing, especially in Kenya and also in Djibouti. So this is done, as I said, through provision of combination of several financing products available within the bank, like concessional loans or grants, trust funds, climate investment funds, etc. So then after de-risking the geothermal exploration, the bank also provide financing to both key players, the power off-taker and also the private developer. So as you know, at the end of the day, the key important role to consider for a development finance institution like African Development Bank, and indeed even the concerned government, would be provision of reliable energy at the right tariff with a good PPA. That's the most important aspect. So in addition to that is just to provide to the private developer adequate, return for their investment. So in Kenya, we have provided concessional funds and grants to GDC for Menengai geothermal development. Then that was successful. So GDC has drilled the wells, and also the government has financed the steam gathering system at the end. So the steam is available for for a capacity of more than 105 megawatt power generation, and at the same time GDC also has through public auction has selected 3 IPPs to develop the power plant. Each IPP will construct a 35 megawatt power plant. So now, our support has not ended at that point. So after de-risking the geothermal exploration activities, so what we have done is we have provided a PRG, partial risk guarantee, for the 105 megawatts, and also, to the government, especially to the off-taker and which is Kenya Power and the GDC. And at the same time, we have provided, through our private sector window to one of the IPPs by mobilizing our senior debt facility, which is a commercial loan, and mobilizing also concessional funds from the Climate Technology Fund, CTF. And we are working further to mobilize additional financing from TDB, the Trade and Development Bank, and from FinFund. So this is just to support the first IPP in order to reach, to financial close. And we hope that the first IPP will start construction of the power plant in the coming months. and we are also working with the other two IPPs to finance, and also all the IPPs really at the end to construct the each of them the 35 megawatt power plant, and to have in total the 105 megawatt at Menengai. In Djibouti, we have also provided, concessional fund to the government just to do the same thing, the geothermal exploration activities in Lake Assal, together with World Bank, the AFD, and other financing institutions.
Thank you.
All this, yeah. Okay. So thank you. I think I don't have much more time. Finally, I want to mention maybe the ongoing effort to design and avail the innovative financing for geothermal. So currently we are working on a regional, on a regional framework that will support 6 African countries like Djibouti, Kenya, Ethiopia, Comoros, Uganda, and Tanzania, which is just to mobilize some fund from a green climate fund that will be in a programmatic approach rather than a project specific. So thank you. I would like to end up at this point.
Thank you very much. Eob, I wonder if I could come back to you because Alameo has mentioned GDC, and I wonder if Eob, you'd like to comment as to whether you see GDC as a replicable model across the region. Obviously, in Kenya, the market is very mature and there's a lot of experience, but do you see it as being a model that could be replicated in other countries, or do you think it would compete with the private sector interests that are already being established?
Really come to think about risk sharing, I think when a government institution assumes the resource side risks, that should be something attractive for private sector participants, because the lead time it takes to develop the resource is so long that equity capital just might not be available. It's always tough to get equity, standing there facing risk for numerous years. So I think that model is replicable, especially if you succeed, if you have the contracting right and you have that risk sharing right, then you can standardize the contracts, you can standardize the PPA, you can come up with a tariff, a range of tariffs, and you can even take it as far as, optioning it the same way like the Scaling Solar program is doing for solar power within Africa. So standardized models serve a good purpose because it becomes transparent and predictable. So you remove some layer of uncertainty, which is always a big factor and hard to price. So GDC success can be replicated. I think private sector parties would tend to like that kind of a model. It remains to be seen because it's hard to say now unless you have an actual plant operating and you assess its performance.
Thank you.
Let's all work for the results to happen.
Julian, would you have a comment as to how you see the GDC model and how that fits in terms of the insurable risks and the involvement of the private sector on a broader basis?
The original conception of GDC to help de-risk and mobilize the investment into Kenyan geothermal sector was a really good one. But I have to question, why the government would want to take all that risk, because ultimately GDC is a government company, government organization. And it's a lot of risk for the governments to take when there are private sector solutions out there and blended finance solutions. So, it's really very much up to the government and the GDC to decide where they want to sit in the risk profile. But it does seem to me a lot of risk for them to take when they may not necessarily need to take that risk. I would encourage them to sort of look at sort of blended finance solutions and de-risking solutions that may be available to them in the private sector. And we've been working to establish the GeoFutures Fund with the Green Climate Fund. And GeoFutures is very, very much to support both public and private entities and indeed PPPs, and by providing an early stage funding to complement the GRC. And this can be available to projects that are developed by GDC and or the private sector alike, because what is important, of course, is the geology here. And yeah, I think all these organizations have a role to play, and it's about collaborating and parceling up the risk to those that are most able to take it and have the ability and appetite for it.
Thank you. Michael, could we come back to you? And obviously the GRMF plays an important role. How do you see that sitting with, say, the activities that Julian is doing? And also asking you whether you see that the role of the public sector is still very important in geothermal in the region, or does it tend to crowd out the private sector opportunities?
Okay. Thanks, Mark. I think a lot of questions, I think, in one. Let's see how can I answer. I think in principle, I would saying yes to the approach of Julian. I think by adding endurance to fund geothermal projects is something very to pursue, and I think we will do it as well. And when times come, I think we can see if it's something to add, for instance, to the GMF as a component. And I think when you're asking about public sector need or public sector crowding out, I would say yes. Currently, I would think public sector is still, I think, are a component we still need here. As we see, we have so many large projects with such a lot of risk involved that probably the private sector alone cannot deal with it, and in particular in different countries where I think even the political environment, economic environment is not so stable in times of Corona, for instance. And I would say there's no crowding out. I would see so far, because if I look just in our portfolio, we have, I think, more or less kind of a 50-50 split between private and public. And both projects are working. So we're doing, as you know, we're doing surface study. So there are things that I think most projects even are private. And for instance, there you see we have one project, they participate in a surface study in the first round. And now I think they're participating in the 6th application round for a drilling project. So I think we see it's working for private and it's working for public as well. So I think I wouldn't say it's something crowding out. There's still a lot of room for both.
Thank you. Ellen, would you like to comment about where you see the opportunities for the bank in East Africa? Is it an area of focus and a potential focus, an area of growth for you?
Thank you. Sorry. I mean, we have a focus on Africa. Africa has a good geothermal resources and good potential for projects. But our focus is not only on electrical generation. We also have a focus on direct use. And even though, as has been mentioned, the schemes that are currently in operation, they are also, like GRMF, as I believe, also support direct use. So there is an increased focus on direct use. And I also see that as potential, especially for job creation and food sustainability in these regions. So I would say that both electrical and direct use projects are of great interest in the future.
Yeah, that's obviously a key area that's been a growing area of interest globally. In terms of direct use, do you see that it fits well with the sort of financing that we've been looking for in the deeper, larger geothermal projects, or is it going to involve different funding?
I mean, we also are trying to implement projects that do both at the same time. So you have electrical generation, and then you have a downstream direct use. But I can see that you more or less require the same. Even though, like Philip came into and Julian, that you need less wells maybe for direct use, you still need to drill. So you need also the risk sharing in the beginning.
Right, thank you. Michael, do you have a comment you'd like to make around direct use?
Yes, absolutely right. Thanks. I think I would just to add, I think to Ellen that yes, direct use is a really, really important issue, and we have a lot of applications GMF for direct use, but so far we couldn't absorb it because it's usually not in our portfolio. But now I think we will, just to inform you that I think we're working on it, and I think there's a good chance that at the beginning of next year we can even fund direct use projects. That's all I would like to comment.
So, Philippe, is this something that you might be able to assist in, bringing in experience from Europe?
Yeah, indeed. I think it was right what Ellen was mentioning. What we're discussing with corporate is multi-wells. So in completely different approach, when you have only a doublet, you need to completely de-risk your project because you will not be able to recover for 30 wells. So what we are looking at also in this transfer from a fully pure grant public covering 100% of the risk, how much the private sector will be able and will be willing to cover part of the risk. So what we are looking at also is that how much from the success is a private developer able to participate. And what we are looking at in a risk insurance is not to cover 100%, but we look at coverage of 80 to 90% of the total project risk. And with that also what we look at in the transition from pure grants to what Julian was mentioning, a private risk insurance is a transition also to a public-private risk insurance. Why? Because you will need to start with low premium. If you want to have a multiplication of project, you need to have low premium, and in Europe what we are looking at is 3 to 7%. Because if it's too high, you will not have enough project in your basket, and you will not have this principle of a mitigation of the risk. So this is two principles. One is that you have a partial coverage. It's not a 100% coverage. We speak 80, 90, but it's for Europe. So let's look at in Africa what will be the right coverage of the total project risk. And the low premium is another key factor for starting to launch the mitigation of the risk. And later, what we see is indeed to go to public-private risk insurance to purely private risk insurance when the market is more mature.
Thank you very much, Philippe. Michael, can I come back to you because you have obviously strong regional experience through the GRMF. As a somewhat of an outsider, well, I started in Kenya in 1978, so I have a background of East Africa. What I hear is 5, not different views, but a mix of views and a mix of opportunities. Is there any mechanism, do you guys sit in a room together and ever talk about what you're all doing and where you might all add to pieces of the puzzle? Because it seems to me that there perhaps is a disconnect. Maybe developers have to go to many shops. Is there, it's probably naive, but is there a one-stop shop that could be fostered in some way to address some of this innovation required?
Yeah, I think that this kind of question usually approached, I think, in every kind of sector after, I think, more than one facilities are on the market. To be honest, I don't see it as an issue currently, in particular in Eastern Africa. I think besides the GMF, I don't see really any big major funding facilities which we should really integrate. The only issue what I really see is you need transparency. That's absolutely right. I think that's a right point on your side, that developers should know which programs are available, where to apply, and what are the conditions for. But I think after that, probably it will be bringing too much coordination efforts about any kind of facilities. And secondly, even if you can coordinate, then usually different donors, different owners of facilities have different approaches, and then sometimes it becomes, I think, not really operational anymore. So I see it, I think, when it comes, for instance, with the project preparation facilities. We have huge number of project preparation facilities in Africa and a lot of kind of competition, but on the other side, all the donors have different approaches and see it in a different way. And so I would think it's not a core issue for geothermal development in Eastern Africa to have a one-stop shop. And as you see, for instance, I just want to raise an example of Tulumoya. You know, Tulumoya, I think you say it's a success story, it's right. And you see there's a lot of different donors. You have the AFDB inside, you know, you have the GMF inside, you have the EIB inside, and even the DG, you know, the German private development funding organization is involved in this one. So I think if you have good projects on private, it's always no problem. And even for public, I think it's even easier. So I would say we should more transparent, but I don't see a big issue currently to have a one-stop shop.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it was more at least to talk to each other, and I'm sure that happens amongst donors, but sometimes, you know, from the outside looking in, you see some replication. I think the next session will be very interesting, and I'm sure Magnus would have some very strong opinions about the funding and what's available, so look forward to hearing from him in the next session. Meshret, do you want to open the floor for any specific questions from the floor?
Thank you, Mike. To have maybe a couple of questions, and also the panelists will be very short and give the key messages. Over to you. Thank you, Mike.
So how can we get questions from the floor? I need some help. Does Ryan manage that?
I can help. We can entertain a couple of questions. So please raise your hand or just send us through chat. So meanwhile, Mike, maybe there are our panelists, if they have some key points to share with us, maybe we can.
Yeah. So maybe we go back round the panelists. We only have a few more minutes left, but Alameo, in terms of the discussion, would you have a few key pointers as to where you see the innovation needs to come from going forward in the next, say, 4 to 5 years? How are we going to drive harder on what we're doing?
Okay, thank you, Mike. I think you see, maybe like in the past, I mean, a few years, so the government, the utilities, and also the private sector in this region, they have put their eyes really to develop the geothermal. So that is really encouraging, and also all the financiers really, including the private sector, we have to work very hard and hand in hand really to develop the geothermal sector. That's the most important. And also the other really underlying factor is the reform which is ongoing in the region, okay? And also the donors and the financiers really now they are supporting the region, the countries. So, and also the government is really committed to support the utilities, okay?
Yes.
So that's the other point what we really need to underline. All these efforts really now are going very well, and so this is now where all the countries in the region look. I mean, Djibouti. I mean, if you look before maybe the recent 3 years before that, I mean, it was not in their really master plan or in their development plan to develop geothermal. Look, Ethiopia. I mean, for the last 40, 50 years, what they did also that 7 megawatt pilot project on geothermal. So now really the sector is booming on this geothermal development. The same thing Uganda is thinking really to develop geothermal. The same Tanzania, even Comoros. The small
I know very much about Comoros myself.
So it's very challenging.
Thank you for your comments. So Julian, given a blank sheet of paper or where you are at the moment, what would be the one or two key things that would help you move forward and you think you could make the most contribution to the region?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike, I think your point about a one-stop shop is sort of going in the right direction. The one-stop shops never work, but certainly collaboration is important. So collaborating with the GRMF, the GeoFutures facility has been specifically designed to complement GRMF and fill in some of the gaps that exist in the financing chain. And the other thing is, speed of response from the public sector to mobilize the fund that have shortlisted us for. We need to secure letters of no objection from participating countries. We have those from Ethiopia. We're still waiting for those from Kenya. And that has taken a significant amount of time. So getting those no objection letters is going to be key if we're going to be able to offer this funding in Kenya. But collaborating with the different funding mechanisms and making sure that the projects have access to the capital they need, and importantly, that they develop good projects.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Philippe, your thoughts perhaps on moving into Africa?
I would like to look at what we can replicate, and I will jump on what Iab was saying, that we look at what is happening in other sectors in solar and wind, where they go to auctioning. We see that indeed you can have different kind of support for the operational support. Anyway, there will be to be technology specific for geothermal, but the key basis is to de-risk projects.
Yeah.
And you can design any support schemes you want for operational support. We see also in Europe, in really mature market, it's not because your market is mature that you don't need to de-risk project. You will always need to de-risk project. In the long-term perspective, we see for larger development, public-private schemes will allow to make this development.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Michael, do you have a comment you'd like to make?
We have.
Okay, Mishra, do we have some questions?
Yeah, we do, but I think okay. We go ahead. Maybe Mr. Jack Kiruja, I see your hand. Jack?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, we do.
Yes, so thank you very much, Mike, and all the panelists for this very informative session. My question is regarding whether you think there are some financing schemes that can be developed that would be suitable for countries that have a very small electricity market. For example, the small island developing states. Are there any financing schemes that you think could be more suitable for this kind of market? Thank you.
Anyone on the panel who would like to comment on that? Ellen, do you have a comment?
I mean, the bank is currently supporting geothermal projects both in St. Lucia and Dominica. Of course, when you have very small market, the projects are more expensive in general because you have smaller power plants. You can install smaller units. So there is available funding, both grants in some cases and loans, and which can be implemented. But I think also, I mean, if you are in Africa, then GRMF is also a stuff that is available for funding of small. I don't think it's matter if they are small or big. I think if you are a private sector, it's usually is it economically viable.
Thank you. Thank you, and I hope that answers your question. Go ahead.
I would add that we're supporting a project on a small island state. The economics are less attractive than big projects in East Africa potentially, but they're still more attractive than the current options that a lot of these small island states have. A lot of it is diesel fuel that is shipped in, which is very expensive and very polluting when used, and of course it creates other problems as well. So geothermal in these small island states is very much an option.
Thank you very much. Ms. Red, I think that's probably taken up our time. And you've got another program right behind. So maybe just for me to thank all of the panelists for the contribution. I think it was a useful discussion. We've covered a number of areas, and I hope it's constructive, and I'm sure that it will slot nicely into your next panel. And so thanks again, Mishred, for the opportunity to join you, and I hope that was of use to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and all the panelists. I think this was really a very dynamic and interactive session. And really, I think we have this business-to-business platform. Those of you who really want to ask more questions, I think get more information from these distinguished panelists, including the moderator. Kindly just tell us what time you will be available. We can make the arrangement online, and you can get more information from KfW, ADB, Joe Fisher, Georisk, World Bank, and TDB as well. Thanking you all, I think, for this interactive session, both participants. Now we'll move to another interesting topic, which is somehow related to the first one, and it is on unlocking the contribution of private sector players and developers in the region. In a similar way, we have very distinguished panelists here, even the moderator. So I think while we are transferring to others, I think I call upon the Tim Jackson, who is our moderator, I think to put on his camera and to be there. We have Magnus, I think from Reykjavik Geothermal. He is our keynote speaker. He will set the scene and tell us his vast experience on these private sector players, particularly in our region. We have Peter Vivian and others. I think all the panelists, they will be introduced by Tim Jackson. Over to you, Tim. Welcome to this AID Africa Reef Geothermal Conference, and we thank you all for being here with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Red. I'd like to welcome everyone to the plenary session 3 on unlocking the contribution of private sector developers. I'm head of engineering, health and safety at Infraco Africa, and I've been working with private sector developers on geothermal in Africa for 10 years now. At Infraco Africa, we're funded by the governments of UK, Netherlands and Switzerland to help companies develop private sector infrastructure in order to alleviate poverty and aid development, and understand the risk of early stage project development and provide patient capital and access to technical and commercial support to help the developers. From our work with the private sector, I can say that developers, investors and lenders are ready and willing to develop geothermal capacity. However, in order to attract finance to the sector, developers need to work with the governments to create the right regulatory investment environments. This issue can be as much a challenge for potential investors as geothermal risk, as I'm sure we'll hear from our esteemed panelists. We're quite tight schedule. We've got 10 minutes or so for the keynote speaker, and then 5 minutes or so for each of the other panelists. I'll start off by introducing Magnus, our keynote speaker. He's the co-founder and chief investment officer at Reykjavik Geothermal. He's been responsible for Argeo's development activities in Africa since the company's founding, including the development of the twin Kobeti and Tulamoy projects in Ethiopia. He's also responsible for Argeo's financing investment activities around the world. In addition to serving on the board of Argeo, Magnus is also a board member of Kobeti Geothermal. Magnus, would you please give us your presentation?
Tim, thank you very much. For the sake of time, maybe, we have put the bios and all from the panelists. Maybe I think we'll ask all participants to look at the important information that we shared. So Magnus, you want to share us to share your presentation, or you will share it from your end? Thank you, Tim. Yeah. Magnus? I can see Magnus is there.
Yeah, he's there, but his sound doesn't seem to be working.
I think we can put on the presentation from our end, maybe. Yeah. Let's send him. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's sharing. Magnus, we have your presentation. Can we display it for you?
Magnus, have you fixed your microphone?
Hello. Are you able to hear me now?
We are. There's a bit of an echo.
I'm very sorry about this. Not sure what. Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Magnus,
Okay.
your presentation from here? We can do that.
I am.
Go ahead, Ryan. We are sharing now the presentation. Here we are. Put it in presentation mode, right? Yeah. Over to you, Magnus.
All right. Sorry about that. Some slight technical difficulties on my end. First of all, it's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of such a distinguished company. I am happy to sort of follow in the footsteps of the people in the previous panel, as I think that their or what I have to say sort of follows up nicely and ties in quite neatly to what they talked about in the previous session. As mentioned previously, I am a co-founder of Reykjavik Geothermal. I've been working on geothermal in Africa for sort of the past decade, as well as around the world, and happy to see people that I work with closely, including the moderator Tim Jackson, including the CEO of Tulumoye Geothermal Operations, Daryl Boyd, and Etienne Jirogi, the chairman of Koberi Geothermal. All of them are close colleagues of mine. But with that, would love to jump in. Can we? we are all here because we are believers in geothermal, I believe. So I'm not going to get into this a lot, but has been touched on a lot over the last couple of days. Geothermal is a great energy resource. It is the rare renewable baseload that has the ability to sort of provide the backbone to a country's electricity system. Solar and wind are fantastic resources, but you can't build an energy system around an intermittent resource. You need baseload. For that reason, we move on. And for that reason, you know, and a number of others, geothermal is a very attractive resource. Now, we also have only 1%, and a little less than 1% actually, of the world's geothermal resources currently being utilized, according to the International Panel on Climate Change. And then the question is, if we move on again, why hasn't geothermal energy kept up? If we look at this chart, you can see that over the past decade, there's been about $1.4 trillion of investment in solar, about $1 trillion of investment in wind, and about 20 billion of investment in geothermal. We're somewhere between 1% and 2% of the overall investment in these competing technologies. And what we're seeing here is, you know, we're in need of a step change, and if we're going to keep up, unfortunately, we're going to have to do things a little bit faster and a little bit more aggressively than we have been to date. Now, that sort of investment also, it should be mentioned, is only possible if you manage to engage the private sector in a very large way. If we're going to move away and make a step change and move away from what we've done so far and get into bigger numbers, we can only do so if we really integrate the private sector. Now, if we think about why we haven't kept up, this is sort of a simplified value chain of project development. You start by identifying a resource, whether it's a wind or solar resource. You assess that resource, you go and you see if you can get a license and a PPA. You get to financial close and tendering, you start to build a plant, and you commission and operate it. We move on to geothermal on the next slide. We have two little bits added to that value chain, and they're highlighted in orange. We have the exploration drilling, as we all know, and then we have the production drilling, which ties into the plant construction. Now, we often during these geothermal conferences focus a lot on the risks that come with that and how difficult it is to do exactly that. And yet, in some places around the world, we've been able to successfully develop those geothermal resources, whereas in others we have not. Now, this is a little bit of a model that I'm going to focus on a little bit. What does it take to get the private sector engaged in the geothermal sector? And what we want here is, on the one hand, we want to find the best resources, and we want to find the easiest places to do business. So on the x-axis, as we can see here, we have the perceived resource quality. And on the y-axis, which we'll get to later, we have what I call the ease of doing business. What we want is to be up in that top right corner. And if we're up in that top right corner, a place that has good resources on the one hand and is perceived to be a good place to do business and a good place to do business on the other hand, that's when we get to places like, you know, Iceland, Italy, Japan, New Zealand, and the Western United States, all of which are developed countries that have onshore geothermal resources and have invested billions in their development. Now, on the resource side, by far the biggest determinant of where we are on this axis is just quality of the resources. And there is very little we can do about that. We have, a Germany, for example, which will sit on the left side of this axis. The resources just aren't that great, owing mostly to the lack of volcanoes and high temperature geothermal areas in Germany and on mainland Europe. On the other hand, we have a place like Ethiopia, which has fantastic geothermal resources on the right-hand side. And if we move on, there are little things that we can do. For example, if you have the most experienced developers, you will increase your chances of success. As we heard in the session before, financial instruments like the GRMF will absolutely lower the risk and will absolutely encourage investment and are incredibly important. But neither of those things, neither having a team like mine, with some of the best geothermal developers in the world, nor the best financial instruments, will change the quality of the resources. Those are fixed. So if we focus too much on that, we may be missing out. We move on one more phase. We can see here that the chances of success in exploration, the dark orange column on this chart is the exploration column. Now, this is from the IFC report, which cataloged over 70% of all geothermal wells developed anywhere in the world. If we move on one more slide, please. What we can see here is that the chances of success in geothermal exploration have increased over time from maybe 40% and up to about 85%. And if we keep moving along, we're going to move quickly because there's quite a few slides, but I want to go through them extremely quickly. Here we can see that, yes, there is a little bit of uncertainty what will come out of each well. There's a high distribution on how many megawatts come out of each well, and this is taking all geothermal wells in their database going back to the 1950s. So the mode here is around 3 megawatts, but the average, once you factor in the good wells and the less successful wells, is actually pretty steady. On a portfolio basis, the output is steady, and the average in the IFC database, covering 7% of all geothermal wells around the world, is around 7 megawatts, a little over 7 megawatts. And another thing, this is actually my own analysis from the IFC database, since the IFC didn't see fit to highlight this particular phenomenon. But what we're seeing here is that just like with the success in exploration, the output from the wells that people drill is increasing over time. Now, we are mostly interested in the best geologies, what is called in the IFC database that young volcanism resources. And they started with about 4 megawatts on average until 1975. And then in the high temperature areas, so the best ones, the ones that we like to focus on, like in Ethiopia and in Kenya and in the region further afield, it was actually even then 5 megawatts per well. From 1976 to 1995, it went up to 6.8. And after 1995, it's actually gone up to 10.6 on average per megawatt. Now, some of those may be rather optimistically reported, I don't know, but the trend is extremely clear. The average is going up over time. Now, what all of that says is we as a private sector developer, we look at all those things and we like exploration risk. That's what we specialize in. We want to take this risk. We want to invest in geothermal resources. We want to invest in the best ones, and we're not afraid of it. It doesn't keep us up at night in areas like in Ethiopia. Now, can we go back one, please? Thank you. What does keep us up at night is, on the other hand, like how easy is it to do business in a market? What is the market risk? And there are two things in particular here, one on the government side and one on the financing side that I want to go through. The first thing is on the market, like, can the best, most experienced developers get access to concessions? Can we develop them, as we prefer to do, greenfield from scratch, without having to worry about counting on other parties to provide us steam or other things? That's the model that we prefer. Can we get a bankable PPA and IA? Can we get fair pricing versus other resources in terms of a least cost development plan? And what do I mean by that? I am a big fan of our friends in the solar industry and the wind industry. I'm actually an investor in the solar industry myself. But I would not pretend as a solar developer to be providing the same service as a geothermal project, because it is intermittent power and it costs the grid far more to integrate intermittent power and to run the grid off intermittent power than it does on baseload, which is what we provide in geothermal. So for that reason, I would strongly encourage everyone in the sector to point out that baseload is an incredibly important part of a least cost development plan, and that you cannot compare per kilowatt hour pricing of intermittent power to baseload power. There needs to be a bit of a premium for providing baseload power. You need a clear regulatory environment, and that has, for example, cost us or been what we spent most of the last 10 years doing in Ethiopia, for example, to make sure that we had an environment where we could move on and develop our projects. And finally, our IPPs welcomed as partners. You want this to be a partnership. All independent power projects are really PPPs. IPPs are PPPs, public-private partnerships. We move on. Move on one slide, please. Now, on the financial institution side, can they provide early stage support like the GRMF does, which is a huge help once again to projects. But also, once we get to the lenders, if you are a lender in the that means drilling. Geothermal means drilling. If we're only willing to provide funding after the drilling has been done, then we're just funding thermal projects. It's not the same thing. The third thing that I want to mention here is the clarity of requirement. It's actually incredibly difficult to be a geothermal developer in terms of having to take that extra step that we saw before and spend tens of millions of dollars on exploration drilling while not knowing at the end what it is that the lenders are going to require of you in order to actually continue or actually provide funding to the project. As we will touch on later, Tulumoye is already drilling, it's already moving ahead, already in discussions with lenders, but we do not yet know what's going to be required, how much steam is going to be required before we can start drawing down funds to build the project and to do production drilling. Standardizing that would be an incredible help. And the last thing is, as was touched on by some of our insurance friends in the previous session, portfolio thinking can be an incredibly powerful thing, also as we saw earlier, because each individual well output can vary on a portfolio basis. The output is predictable. Now, let's move on. Now, just one little case study at the end. I wanted to focus on these two things. On the one hand, market risks, and on the other hand, resource risks. We cannot change the resource quality. And here we have the example of Turkey. They have decent geothermal resources, not great ones, but pretty decent ones. And they are stuck in that particular, on that particular point on the axis. conceptual model, but they are sort of slightly above average on the resource quality scale. As we move to the next slide, what they were able to do is to create an incredibly beneficial regulatory environment and government support, including by setting for a limited amount of time a feed-in tariff that gave developers clarity on exactly what was going to be the price and exactly what the PPAs were going to look like. Everything was very quickly done, and they were able to do it in a hurry. And at the same time, there were innovative and consistent financing solutions from both the local banks and from the DFIs. And what ends up happening, if we move on to one more slide, please. What ends up happening is that you develop 1,200 megawatts in 7 years. And here, just like in our case, you have a lot of developers, private sector developers, who are very happy to put their money to work. The only thing that you need is help from our friends and partners, both on the government side and on the financing side. And I wanna emphasize this one more time, just summarize this one more time. There isn't too much that we can do to fix things on the resource side. If we have good resources, we as a private sector investor and a lot of our partners are very, very happy to invest in them as long as we have a very good team around us. On the market side, on the other hand, there are lots of risks there that both on the government side and on the financing side, where a lot of work can be done to facilitate things and to make life easier for us, just that has been done here in Turkey. And the results are, as you can see here, very impressive. So one last slide. Quickly takeaways. Geothermal power is renewable and baseload, which is a rare combination. Here we go. Yep. It's a rare combination and incredibly important for building up a modern power sector. It's more complex, risky, expensive, and all the things that we usually hear, including knowledge intensive. But the private sector is more than willing to invest and more than willing to take these risks as long as we have a very good resource. Models like the GDC model and concessional financing, public financing in the exploration phase can be useful. And in our case, we would find them particularly useful in areas where the resources are not obvious. And at that point, we would love to, once a not obvious resource has been proven, then we would love to step in and be able to take over that resource and manage it ourselves. That's what our private sector investors are most interested in. They trust us to manage the resource. That's why they're investing in us, and they would like to do it that way. But if we move to the right side of the slide, we need support. We need support from governments and off-takers, as I mentioned. Give the best resources, which are very limited, to developers that have a track record of doing something with them. Provide bankable PPAs and IAs, fair pricing, a clear regulatory environment, and treat your IPPs as partners rather than a necessary evil you have to deal with. And then the financial institutions, please help us, continue helping us by providing early support, remembering that financing geothermal means drilling. So that's what we do. And on a portfolio basis, those outcomes are predictable. And then last thing, clarify and standardize what exactly is required in terms of providing steam out of funding providing steam before you start to release funding into projects. And with that, I've gone over my time a little bit. It's a little more complex to present when you can't control it yourself, but I'll leave it at that. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Magnus. Given the time, I think we'll go straight to the other panelists. And so I'd like to start by asking Eddie Ngurogi, as chairman of Covetti and former CEO of Parastatal, what does he think the private sector can bring to developing geothermal projects, and what challenges does it face? You're mute, Eddie. Can hear you now, but not see you.
You can hear me. Yes. Great. Thank you very much, team, and thank you, Mesret, for organizing this. I'll take over from where Magnus just said in terms of, yes, the private sector is very keen to participate in geothermal, both in the generation and also even in the alternative usage. But as Magnus has said, there are several things that need to happen. And one of them is to have a proper regulatory regime. The power sector reforms that has been ongoing in various countries needs to be there. And specifically when I talk about Corvette, Ethiopia, just to tell you some of the things that we have had to work with and to see them happen before we could this is obviously perhaps the first IPP in Ethiopia, and therefore we want to process of getting EEP themselves understand what a PPA is. We have had the geothermal law itself enacted. We have had the regulations themselves adopted. We had to get the implementation agreement approved by the National Assembly. So there has been a lot of regulatory things that have been done to ensure that we as the private sector are comfortable to be able to come. There are a few things that Magnus has touched on. And those issues, for instance, the strength of the offtake. For the private sector to get involved in geothermal, they need to be reassured that, yes, the off-taker will be able, obviously, it's a commercial risk of payment from the off-taker. One of the things that we found, obviously, with EEP were arguing that they have too much energy in the on the grid right now, and that they would want to get the government to backstop. Obviously, one of the things they had to do is scale down the. So the off-taker is very, very important for the private sector, and we had to make the decision, yes, we can't scale down the project so that the off-taker himself is comfortable. One major issue that, again, Magnus talked about and which I want to touch on briefly is the whole issue of the return for the investor. Private sector investors obviously want a return. And what is happening across most of the African countries now is, of course, solar has taken over as a new thing, as a lot of people who are going into solar. But you cannot compare geothermal with solar. And we need to get the policymakers to understand that yes, you may be talking about 5 US cents for solar, but that's not what you should be looking for geothermal. There needs to be a bit more education for the policymakers to understand about the return. And because this is long-term development, it's not short-term like solar, and therefore you do need to have a better return. The other bit, and please stop me when you feel that I should stop. I could speak for the whole day, but I don't want to take time for the others. So just stop me when you feel I've spoken enough. The other bit, which is
maybe just one more minute if you don't mind.
Okay. The other bit, which is always tricky, is obviously the convertibility of currencies. For an investor, you want to have a return on the currency that you are investing. In a few countries, or in a lot of countries, you would be paid in a local currency, and there needs to be a mechanism for that. So, and that's one of the things that the private sector would really be looking at. How would I be able to repatriate the dividends or the earnings that I get out of this investment? And that's very, very important. And there needs to be a mechanism which guarantees the investor that can always be able to get his money. I'll stop there for now, but I'm ready for thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Now, can I go to Daryl Boyd, CEO of Tulamoye, and ask, how do you think the private sector, or how you've been able to develop the sector with private sector funding?
Thanks, Tim. I didn't prepare for that specific question, but let's see if I can cover it. So, hi, everyone. So outside of the fundamentals of a strong regulatory and legislative framework, which in the context of Tulamoye geothermal, Ethiopia has done a pretty great job in putting in place through Ethiopian Energy Authority, through the Geothermal Proclamation, PPP Proclamation, and many others. There's two main things for me that would, I think, would be helpful to unlock private sector investment in the region. The first point relates to the different development models. I think there's enough space and room in the sector for off-takers, grantors, and utilities to consider the different models, whether that's de-risking by doing the drilling yourselves and then selling the steam so the developer just builds and operates the power plant, whether it's self-delivery by the utility, if it has access to that level of capital, or whether it's greenfield development model, such as Tulamoye and Kobeti, or even a true PPP model, where the grantor and utility takes an equity stake. And as a customer or a buyer or an off-taker, why wouldn't you want different models so that you can spread your delivery risk? Then it also enables you to contrast and compare between the different models in terms of the value for money you're getting, the technologies, and the speed and certainty of delivery. My second point, I would say, is a confident and informed customer is a good customer, and a good customer typically achieves the best value for money for itself. So having internal capacity and market awareness, complemented by good external specialist advisory in legal, technical, and value for money fields in particular, helps build that customer confidence and better facilitates moving ahead at pace that good investors do like to see, and helps achieve value for money and speed of development. So alongside fantastic equity risk mitigation products and support such as GRMF, greater capacity and advisory funding to grantors, off-takers and buyers would also be very helpful. So back to you, Tim.
Thanks, Daryl. Now I'd like to ask Mugri Manga, Managing Director of Ulsuswa Energy. Looking at Kenya, how you find that the private sector can help, and what challenges are you facing?
Thanks, Tim. Wonderful to be here with everyone. I think I'd like to talk about the above ground challenge, because in Kenya we have managed to prove ourselves when it comes to the resource of the Great Rift Valley. However, the regulatory frameworks when it comes to geothermal has taken a step forward. We've moved from the last Geothermal Resource Act of 1982 to now being merged with the Energy Act of 2019. So the regulations are there. We have the laws to govern how geothermal is to be exploited in the country. However, just to reiterate and echo what some of the panelists have correctly said, as private sector, one of the key things that is a big challenge is the timelines of the project. Because yes, the laws are there, even when it comes to land, community lands, public land, when it comes to setting the tariffs. However, the timelines of getting a tariff letter, getting a PPA, power purchase agreement, letter of support from the government, can take many, many years. And one of the key things that private sector looks at is risk and return. And obviously return is connected to the timeline of getting your return. And so this is a big challenge, and in trying to, allow the government and encourage the government in its different sectors to harmonize the process of actually creating an environment that is predictable, that is credible, that you can bank on when it comes to the timelines. This is very important. And, it also relates back to the question of, is the government's participation in the sector beneficial for IPPs? I think the biggest challenge there is on the return, because government sometimes is not purely motivated on the kind of returns that the private sector is looking for. So this may create a level of disharmony within the markets because the government may say, look, tariffs of 6 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour is sufficient. But to attract the equity needed for such risk, especially for greenfield projects, where you have to take on the drilling risk, it's not sufficient. So allowing the market and the government and the regulators to understand that will take some time. However, with private sector, we are moving in the right direction so we've managed to jump through most of the hoops. We're going towards drilling now. And it will be interesting to see what the outcome would be, because it would be actually one of the first greenfield projects to be developed by the private sector. So we're excited, and I think Kenya is setting up to be a great place for private sector investment in geothermal.
Thank you, Mugwe. Now I'd like to move to Peter Vivian Neal, CEO of Kalahari Geoenergy. I think you've got a slightly different approach to managing some of these above ground or market risks. Can you tell us about your approach?
Tim, first of all, I would like to thank Magnus for his presentation, which I thought really set out in crystal clear terms the challenges that we all in the private sector have. The second point I'd say right off is that Zambia and indeed our project are very much outliers to the East African model, and therefore we have a very different approach. The first is that Southern Africa is private in the resource sector, is private sector driven, whether that's mining or anything else. The government provides the regulatory field, and that applies to us. I do not see a GDC model working in this country through a lack of capacity. And as Magnus says, this is knowledge intensive. So here I see we do not have high-grade geothermal resources. We have adequate geothermal resources, and we're currently doing a feasibility study on an initial 10 megawatts with, going back to Magnus's slide, 2 megawatts per well as the target, which we believe we've correctly modeled. I think that our challenges, so the other thing I'd say on the regulatory field, we are a deregulated energy market. We can transmit and distribute independently of the parastatal, and the Act is very clear about that. And there are very clearly set out timelines for things like implementation agreements and power generation licensing, which don't stretch to years. They're normally measured in either 60 or 90-day increments. So I think that the route from feasibility study to development should be a lot quicker here, very much in the line it would take to develop a mine. So I think that is very much a positive here. As I said, there is still capacity building required, but we are way down that route with the Department of Energy, who've been hugely supportive to us in terms of identifying potential problems and helping us overcome them on the surface. And again, from a financing point of view, we've had to take a very different approach. We do not believe that the GRF was a suitable vehicle for care, and declined to go down that route. We have raised quasi-private renewable energy performance which has helped us through to where we are, and we have a grant from the US government for our feasibility study. Once through that, we will obviously have to look at our options again and how we go forward. But generally, I think the situation here is definitely pro-private sector. We believe that we are happy with most of the risks, but we don't see anybody else coming into our environment. So maybe the story isn't out there. Tim.
Thank you, Peter. So one question we had on the chat is about the level of exploration and qualitative data required by private investors before they start investing. And this is something that I think's proved very successful in Turkey and is in line with, there's quite a lot of discussion around whether governments should explore resources with slim holes before auctioning off. Perhaps we could go back to Magnus, as you mentioned Turkey, and see what your thoughts are on the value of governments doing initial exploration and to what extent they should do that.
So to Darrell's point earlier, I think there was an old Barack Obama line about energy policy where he believed, or his tagline was, all of the above. And there are multiple ways of sort of skinning the cat, and there are multiple ways of getting to where you need to go, and a number of those models are good, and I don't want to speak badly of any of them. What I can say is that that what we have found with our investors is that they are most comfortable with or very comfortable with greenfield development in great project locations, and where they have us managing, or sort of an experienced team managing the drilling and the exploration in a private sector entity that sort of has interests that are fully aligned with theirs, and they prefer to do it that way. And in particular, they prefer us to be able to manage the resource long term. On the other hand, in the places where the resources are not quite as obvious, in those places, we as a company would not be as willing to invest our own capital in improving a resource. And in those instances, I think public financing of exploration is a great idea and a very appropriate idea. It's just making sure that one does not crowd out the other. If the public, having multiple models, I think is a good thing.
Tim, if I could please come in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to come in because I think you've seen some of the different models in Kenya where you've got GDC taking a lot of risk, some greenfield developers, and also All Power where there's been some exploration work done for them. So it'd be good to have your thoughts.
I think it's very important, and Magnus has divided the two. One where the resource is very well known, which is easy, and in other places where the resource is not proven at all. And obviously that you require more information. And to my mind, this really needs to come from government, from public service. And as one of the architects of GDC, that was the initial intention of GDC. Our idea of GDC was that they would be able to explore all the 14 sites that we had, that KenGen had actually done the initial exploration, and GDC would then develop it and prove the theme by doing the exploration wells. But things changed. Obviously, the mandate changed. But that was the idea, because then what would happen is if any private developer were to develop any of the areas, he would be given the data as part of the package. And this is one of the things that we were saying. You need a transparent process of allocating the resources. And therefore, as part of that, the government would provide the data of the resource in various areas that had been exploited. And I believe strongly that there is no other way. There is nobody who is going to go to a completely virgin area and start the surface exploration and what it takes far too long, and the private sector doesn't have that patient capital to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. Magri, I wonder if you have any thoughts on whether it would help at all to have the public sector do initial exploration.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think it is a good idea. GDC has been given that mandate in Kenya, as most of you may know. I think it's a matter of understanding from an internal perspective what the government needs to achieve and what their mission is. As said before, some countries it may actually not be beneficial to set that up. The government also needs to ask itself whether private sector can take on most of that risk. So I think the structures is what is important. If you look at Menengai, it has taken time to come in line, but I think GDC is beneficial to the country and is needed in order to open up areas that have been closed and that private sector may or may not be interested in. A good example of that is the barrier where we are operating. The first people to set foot there and do serious exploration work was actually GDC. And it was through that data that we were able to make an informed decision to carry on investing in the detailed surface studies, along with our partners, Kenyan, who are the company that did the studies for us. And now we're going into drilling. So we are seeing the benefits of government taking on some of that risk. And it's also important for data building within a country. Research and development is critical. And the more data we have, the better off we are as a country, and the better off we would be able to be in attractive investment and also developing the sector.
Thank you. So we've had, I've just been notified that we've got an extra 15 minutes for questions if needed, and I've had another question in about insurance products. So I'd like to go to maybe Daryl first and ask what role have they considered insurance products, and if they would, what would they consider?
I must confess, Magnus is probably better placed to answer this overall. But specific to TMGO, we found that there isn't much market appetite in the insurance industry. Where there is, particularly relative to drilling, it's very expensive and in my view, poor value for money. And that's not just my view, actually. It's also our boards and our sponsors. I know Julian, who was on a previous session and talked about potential products through Green Climate Fund to introduce some more reasonably priced and better value for money products. But at the moment, I mean, for instance, the proof of the pudding is TMGO, other than its commitments to comply with our GRMF contract, we're not exploring options for well insurance or drilling insurances. So I think that tells you that the market is either not kept up or maybe it's taken a few big hits in recent years. Peter, as a different sort of project, have you had any discussions with insurers and found suitable products?
At a very preliminary stage, I do agree with Daryl. I consider that what I've been offered to be poor value for money at this stage, and I'd rather just take the risk ourselves, but just be very careful about how we analyze the data before we go forward to each step. So therefore, minimizing the risk of a failed well or an unproductive part of the exploration program.
And Magnus, as suggested by Daryl, would you like to comment on reliance placed insurance and the relative cost in East Africa?
As as touched on by Julian in the previous session, there's different ways of structuring insurance products, and I think what is difficult and maybe poor value for money, as people have suggested, is trying to get insurance to sort of replace equity. What insurance is good at is covering low probability, high cost events, and therefore they are much better placed to and able to provide cheaper options on a portfolio of wells, a larger portfolio of wells, sort of returning something that is unlikely, on the low end, and for that, I think it can have a purpose, not necessarily for us as equity, but to get lenders and in some cases investors comfortable with protecting their downside. And for that, I think it can be quite useful. I think where it's less useful is sort of ensuring one or two wells where it ends up costing you a lot of effort and a lot of time, and maybe having to, or sort of interfering in your approaches when you are trying to ensure the outcome of a single well. I think equity is much better suited to that.
Would you say that for early stages, the exploration grants like GMF are better suited?
In my mind, absolutely. In my mind, products like the GRMF, which are sort of directly where money is put to work directly to lead to megawatts. That is a good use of funds. Where money is put to work where it is not directly going towards putting megawatts online, and I showed you some of the statistics on the success of wells just globally. I think then when we are putting money towards other things than putting megawatts online, we're not focusing on the right things.
Mugwe, do you have any thoughts on the relative roles of grants versus insurance during the development phase?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Magnus has said. In the early stage exploration, if you're starting off with 3 to 4 wells to begin with, it really doesn't make much sense to go with the insurance companies. We've had early discussions with them and engagement, and I can tell you, the process of getting insurance is, number one, quite laborious. Number two, it is very expensive, and it's not where you want to be putting your money in the early stages. It's also not attractive for the insurance companies because they want a larger portfolio of wells to insure. So for us, we would prefer focusing on grants such as GRMF and seeking equity to take us from a greenfield to a brownfield project. So in our view, in the early stages, insurance is not ideal, but perhaps later on it could be ideal. And once you've proven the resource, you may get a lower premium, which could be more attractive at that time.
Okay. So changing tactics a bit, there's a lot of interest nowadays in direct use for geothermal, which can be useful for mitigating off-taker risk and restoring investor returns. Maybe Peter, you could start by maybe describing how you see direct use supporting your project.
Tim, our project is situated in traditional lands occupied by the Tongas, which are akin to the Maasai and the Maoris, in that their entire livelihood is involved in cattle. And there are some 90,000 head of cattle around us where we're working, and not one drop of their product reaches commercial market because there's no collection point or energy to pasteurize it. Connected to that, we also see the value of fish as a source of protein in developing countries, and the fisheries which used to be very famous in Zambia are now completely fished out. So fish farming has a high agenda, or high up the agenda, and is, as I think everybody knows, can be enhanced significantly by geothermal heating of the fish ponds. So I consider, and I have been passionate about this in the 10 years I've been in the geothermal space, that geothermal power goes hand in hand with direct applications, and in our case, those direct applications lead to a quadruple bottom line of social uplift in a very, very poor area through the processing of milk and bringing it to the market. Obviously, the commercial application of producing power. Climate mitigation. Zambia, particularly the area we're working at, is already suffering clearly from the changing temperature and changing rainfall patterns. Food security is now a big issue in a country which was completely reliant. And finally, because we're on the edge of a national park, which is essentially a cattle ranch at the moment, environmental enhancements by moving the cattle with the carrot of the processing and allowing the wildlife to come out of the far corners, and therefore drawing tourism and all that brings to a community. So I do see the whole direct and indirect applications as going hand in hand, an important part of our operation here in Zambia. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. And Magnus, do you think it could equally help high temperature resources? You're mute.
Can you repeat the question, please?
So it's whether direct use applications can help mitigate off-taker risk and help restore returns. Is it as applicable to high temperature resources as more medium temperature resources?
Yeah. I think one of the great things about geothermal energy is that, if you compare it to a solar plant or a wind plant, where you sort of set them up and then you look at them and they generate electricity. With geothermal energy, pretty much everywhere in the world where there's been significant geothermal development, you've had all these additional offshoot industries pop up. And I think they're fantastic, and I think they're useful. There are some places, like here in Iceland, where there is an obvious large-scale application to direct use in terms of heating. There are other places around the world where there are obvious uses, but maybe they're not quite at the same scale as a power project or as something meriting drilling into a high-temperature geothermal area. But what it does do is have a fantastic community effect, fantastic sort of economic multiplication effect, and in many cases it also can help with the returns. But more than anything, in my mind, the big plus of it is you've built, when in our case at least, when you've built a power plant, you have so many options for how to put all of those extra products to use, whether that's in agriculture, whether that's in in spas, in heating, in food drying, or anything of the sort. And we look forward to exploring all of those options in Ethiopia, for example.
Yeah, and Eddie, I haven't spoken to you for a while. Would you like to express some views on the benefits of direct use to supporting projects?
Yes, they would, because as you have just said, they would also mitigate on the off-taker risk, because then you have more than one off-taker. As you know, in Kengen, one of the things that they're doing is setting up an industrial park in Orkaria, where they can then be able to supply steam directly to some of the users. Of course, we had always in Kengen used it for farming, the flower farms. We had always provided them with heat for their farming. And of course, the recreational part, which is the spa, which needs to be expanded, and that can be piped out to all the hotels around, for instance, Orkaria. is not just a spa, but the steam can be pumped. That creates a bigger pool of customers rather than just depend on the off-takers that they have currently. I think that's something that should be explored in all the development, geothermal development that will be. Thank you.
Okay. And finally, Mugwe, does direct use feature as part of your plans for the barrier complex?
Tim, for us, our purpose is to bring transformation and impact through geothermal energy. And the community that is around us is a fishing community and also a pastoral community. And we are looking at ways in which we could harness the geothermal steam and brine to add value, whether it's through in the fishery, horticulture, floriculture, tourism, etc. But I would say that it is a nice add-on, but is it an add-on that you could rely on to boost your IRR and put into the financial model that presents you to investors? Not to my, I don't think so personally. However, it is a fantastic add-on with projects, especially around areas that have communities, which are most of them, and it will bring value addition and development to the area, which is fantastic. I think areas that would have direct impact on the bottom line at the early stage would be such as the carbon credits. Japan and Kenya have signed bilateral agreements through the JCM, the Joint Crediting Mechanism. I think through the Paris Agreement, we're just waiting for Article 6 to be ratified. And I think there will be a lot of potential and interest in that because it will impact the bottom line of projects and assist in taking projects forward and making it profitable.
Thank you. And another development in recent years is that in Kenya there's been concerns about excess generation, and in Ethiopia they're bringing on the Renaissance Dam, and there's also problems in Zambia with the off-takers. I just wondered from our panelists what they thought might be solutions to concerns about there being too much generations in those countries. Maybe Daryl, would you be able to say something on that?
Ask me an easy one, please, Tim. We're very much focused on exploration drilling at the moment and managing the risks that we can manage. We have the utmost faith and confidence in Ethiopian Electric Power and the Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Electricity that they know their numbers and they're marrying that with Ethiopia's progress and aspirations for industrialization, the progress of the industrial parks, the new railways, expanding access to electricity. So no, it's not something high on my agenda. I'm trusting our customer that they've got all that under control.
Perhaps Eddie, with your international experience, you might be able to offer some thoughts how to address off-taker concerns about excess generation.
Yes, unfortunately, a lot of the countries across Africa have gotten it wrong. For a lot of them, they thought access will increase demand. And I always say the problem with that is that you go more and more to the rural areas, the consumption gets less and less. You're connecting people at the end of the distribution line whose consumption is very, very minimal. So you may be having big numbers in terms of connections, but actually your costs go up because those people consume much less than the cost even to connect them. And so this requires a wider policy issue. It's really for the government to look at. And I like what Ethiopia has been doing. It's more industrialization. We really need to do what we can be able to do with industries, industrial parks, to be able to create that demand through the industry. But also it comes up with wider policy issues, for instance, of imports. There are some things that we can be able to manufacture, and importing some of those things. So what is it that can be able to be manufactured in this country that we don't want to ban? Of course, we are in an area where we are open to. But on the other hand, we do need to encourage the local manufacturing that we can increase on demand. But demand can only come through industrialization, not access. People can all be connected, but not move the dial, because and which is good. And I'm not saying it's bad. I think it's a good thing. All the connections is a very good social program, but not necessarily one that will increase in terms of demand. Thank you.
And Peter, I think you have challenges with your off-taker, ZESCO, due to the debt challenges in Zambia. Do you think there's any potential solution with access to the Southern Africa power pool?
I think it's always worth addressing the point about excess production. I mean, we generate 1,400 megawatts as of last week. The current demand is 2,600, and it's increasing by 200 megawatts per annum. And the big users here, it's not the people on the end of the lines, it's the mines. And so by restricting parts of the mines, we are restricting the economy. So it comes back, this is a semi-industrialized economy in the sense of mining. It comes back to being able to increase that production. You're absolutely right. There is a big problem. The big elephant in the room for us is the parastatal. The 2019 Electricity Act has triggered the break, well, not the breakup, but the end of the monopoly. And so therefore, generators can transmit and also distribute, either to in conceptually retail, but certainly in captive to major users. And we do have this intermediary off-taker included in the Act, and there is indeed such an entity which has now reached financial close, which is effectively a synthetic PPA. They take the risk, and they have the access to Southern African power pool. So if they are unable to get paid here, and there are a number of court cases either already running or pending for private power producers to take on ZESCO, then this intermediary is able to sell throughout the power pool. So I do see solutions. We are engaged in them. But as has just been said, right at the moment, we're trying to reach the conclusion of a feasibility study before we're able to even consider that under the regulations in this country.
Thank you. Meseret, do we have time for sort of final comments from our panelists, or would you like to give people a chance for a break?
Yeah, we need to have maybe a 15 minutes break before we start the third plenary session, but you can give 1 minute each if they are just, we have about 3 minutes to 11:50 for your.
Okay, so I'll go back to the original order. So Magnus, if you'd like to sum up in a minute.
Well, I spoke for a long while earlier, so I don't want to take too much additional time. What I will say and emphasize is that the private sector is ready. The private sector wants to invest in good, high-quality geothermal projects, and I believe that we will be able to bring in lots of additional capital, and then as much capital as is required for the highest quality projects. What is required to turn those projects into highest quality projects is close collaboration and continued good work from our host governments on the one hand, and the off-takers, and then our financiers on the other hand.
Thank you. And Eddie, your concluding thoughts? You're on mute. Eddie, are you there? You're still on mute, I think.
Eddie.
There you are.
You're back. Yeah.
Right. My final thoughts is that the private sector has got a huge appetite for investing in the geothermal space, but the regulatory landscape needs to be worked on. They need policies which are predictable. They need transparency in allocation of resources. And obviously, they need good return at the end. Obviously, there must be a good. Thank you.
Thank you. And Daryl, your thoughts?
Opportunity to participate with the great and the good. We're just very proud and excited to be blazing the trail, to be supporting Ethiopia in developing its geothermal sector, to support our customer organizations and other stakeholders along this journey, and to be investing in Ethiopia. So, because we are at that vanguard, we recognise that extra pressure. Also, that it's not just about delivering on behalf of our board and sponsors and other stakeholders. Potentially the eyes of the world and other investors are on us. So feel that extra pressure in terms of being determined to succeed, so that others will.
Thank you. And Magri, final thoughts on the contribution of the private sector?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to look into the future and ask ourselves, where is Africa going? Where are we going to be in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years? We're going to add another billion people by the year 2050. We are going through a green revolution globally. The need for power will be there. I think the narrative, also picking up from the excess capacity, needs to be discussed in depth and unpacked. I think the narrative can be discouraging to investors, but I'm here to say that I don't think we have an issue of excess capacity. I think we have an issue of not having high voltage transmission lines being connected to the right areas. In Kenya right now, Western and Nyanza do not have a good connectivity. They do not have good capacity. There is a line going in there, which will see the uptake of close to 200 megawatts. Northern Kenya is the same. Parts of the coast is also the same. And I think this is actually going to prompt more uptake of electricity. Our dream by 2030, the vision for Kenya, is to have 10,000 megawatts and to be a middle-income country. That's around the corner. We only have capacity of 2,700 megawatts. Our demand as of last week was close to surpassing 2,000 megawatts, which is better than the pre-COVID level. And so I think we need to look at it in the long run and say to ourselves, what have other countries gone through in their revolution and evolution? Thailand, that has 60 million people, produces 40,000 megawatts. Cambodia, a country that has seen war, is at 6,000. So I think we have a long way to go as Africa. There's tremendous potential, and we have the resource. So we're positive, we're optimistic as private sector, and we're looking forward to being part of the green revolution. Thank you.
Thank you. And Peter, do you want to summarise that, finish up?
Tim, I certainly follow everybody else. I see, certainly in Southern Africa, that the private sector will lead a geothermal exploration and development, but in partnership with the governments, because you need that to win the support and ensure that you actually get the right regulatory framework as we move forward. And I'm talking about the whole of Southern Africa, not just Zambia.
Thank you. So I think it just leaves me to thank all the panelists, particularly for the enthusiasm showed by the private sector for developing geothermal, and hand back to Meseret for the rest of the conference.
Yeah, thank you very much, team and all the panel members. Very, very interactive session, and also the finance one. I think we have got a very, very good message, really, from both plenary sessions, and which we will include in our resolution as a go-ahead, and also to inform the decision makers what should be done for the innovative financing scheme, as well as for the actually attracting or unlocking the challenges of the private sector. We all agree that the involvement of private sector is very crucial because they bring knowledge, they bring skill, they bring finance. Without this, no geothermal development. We cannot add any megawatt without the private sector involvement. I like the way, Peter, you have concluded it. Yes, good to have also the public-private partnership involving both, bringing together, join forces, and move on. Thank you very much. And for the program, we'll have a 15 minutes break, and then we'll go back to the plenary session 4 on renewable energy. So you can stretch your legs and maybe have some coffee wherever you are, and then we will continue. And thank you very much. And see you after 15 minutes. Over to you. Housekeeping, Ryan?
Yes, Meseret, thank you for these 2 wonderful sessions. So yes, tea is in order. So kindly 15 minutes tea. You can, of course, share your tea virtually. I don't have tea, so if you have tea, kindly just share with me also. I'm happy to join in on your tea break. So let us join again in 15 minutes back here for the next plenary. Thank you. Thank you, Meseret.
Yeah. Okay, we can have some break music or something. Hi, Zerubbabel, how are you? He's already here. Let me bring other panelists as well. Yes, I want to do. Africa needs solution. It's no solution. Solution. African energy needs thermal energy solution. Solution. Africa energy needs energy solution. Yes, Marcos. He's there. Yes, I saw him, but I can bring him now. Okay. Thank you. Again, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, from wherever you are. I think we are sending our greetings from Nairobi, Kenya, from where our headquarters is. And we really thank you for maybe those of you who are really on the different time zones still here with us. So now we are going to our plenary session 4 on renewable energy and actually the role of geothermal in renewable energy mix. And I think our moderator is Mr. Marcos Malaco from the New Zealand African Geothermal Facility. And I think he will just lead the session. And we have the keynote speech, I think from African Union Commission, Mr. Atef Marzouk. And I think we have other, prominent panelists, Ato Zalalem from East African Power Pool and COMESA, and also from different parts of the region. So we'll be very happy, I think, anybody to jump in also to really ask questions and to make it very interactive. So I give the floor to Marcos. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Masarat. It's a great pleasure and honor to be part of this plenary session. Thank you also for the introduction. In this session, we have the keynote speaker and 3 panelists. On the program, there were, I think, 6 panelists, but the other 3 are not available, which means we will have time for discussions. So we look forward to that. I think I will invite the keynote speaker, Mr. Atef Marzouk, to have his keynote speech and to set the scene. Mr. Atef, please go ahead.
You see. Atef?
Let's see.
I just spoke with him a while ago.
I don't see him online, but maybe we'll just give him a few minutes. Maybe he's having difficulty connecting.
Let me. Atef is here with us. He's connecting. Yeah, he had some connection problems. Yeah. You see, we have a number of links that we sent, and sometimes people get confused.
Yeah, that's right. I still can't see him though.
Yeah, he said he's connecting.
Okay, good.
So meanwhile, I think from housekeeping, can you just put on his presentation just to save time? Team, please just upload Mr. Atef's presentation. Thank you.
So just a quick message to the panelists. We probably will allocate 5 to 7 minutes for you to present your speeches, and then after that we will open up the floor for discussion.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's good. Welcome.
He's trying. He has. He told me to unmute him, but I cannot see him.
Is Ryan around?
Ryan, can you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to see where he is. He joined in using what name so that I can. Can he send a chat? Atef, just send a chat, then I'll see you. Just write in the chat box. I can.
Yeah, I still don't see Atef.
Don't touch. Yeah, I got him. Yeah, he's here with us now.
Now it's good. Now it's good. Yes, yeah. And the camera is good also. Okay, thank you.
We can't see you, Atef. Can you turn on the video, please?
Turn off the video?
Yes, please.
Okay.
On, not off, on.
It's on now, yes?
So welcome, Atef. We have already introduced you to the audience, so you can proceed with your keynote speech.
Yeah, we'll
upload
your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Marcos, moderator of this session. And sorry for the late, because this is a technical problem. It is not from my side. At the beginning, I would like to I saw something here. Allow. Okay. On behalf of the African Union Commission and my own behalf, I extend a warm welcome to all the panelists and the delegation to the plenary session 4. The theme of this our session is the role of geothermal in renewable energy mix. I would like to thank the organizers of the 8th Argeo conference for giving me this opportunity as keynote speaker to address this gathering at this important session. I trust that you and your family and the loved ones, as well as organization, you are safe and healthy in the face of this health challenge. We already know the huge task ahead for our beloved Africa, especially sub-Saharan African, in meeting their energy access challenges. Currently, over than 600 million Africans have no access to electricity, and the 2.7 billion people in the world still rely on traditional biomass for cooking. This having a huge impact on poverty reduction and the human development effort worldwide. Power consumption per capita in sub-Saharan Africa is the lowest of all continents, currently estimated at 181 kilowatt per annum, compared to 6,500 kilowatt hour in Europe and 13,000 kilowatt hour in United States. Energy sector bottlenecks and power storage are estimated to cost Africa some 2 to 4% of the GDP annually, undermining economic growth, employment creation and investment. And an estimated 600,000 African, mostly women and children, die annually due to indoor air pollution associated with the use of fuel wood for cooking. Children underperform for lack of electricity, since over 90% of Africans primary school lack electricity. Lives are risk in Africa. Hospital as life-saving equipment and service lie unused because of lack of electricity. The paradox in that there is a huge energy resource in Africa, both in terms of renewable and non-renewable energy sources that could easily provide modern energy access to the African population. The continent has well over 10 terawatts of solar potential, 350 gigawatts of hydraulic potential, 110 gigawatts of wind potential, and over 20 gigawatts of geothermal resource potential in East Africa Rift System countries. Africa cannot power its homes and the business unless it unlocks this huge renewable energy potential. Therefore, the major challenge is how to convert the huge energy resource into reliable, efficient, and sustainable energy service. Recently, there is an increased recognition of geothermal energy worldwide as a reliable and alternative energy source. According to the World Energy Council, geothermal resources could be used to produce over 8% of the total world electricity, which could supply about 17% of the world population. If all of this over-mentioned energy potential in Africa is developed, it will go a long way in addressing electricity access challenges in East Africa and other regions through interconnection. There are many reasons why geothermal is increasingly becoming a viable energy resource at the global and regional stage level. These reasons include: first, the use of the geothermal energy as an excellent alternative to conventional energy system, especially in an increasing carbon concentrated globally policy environment. Second, the characteristic of geothermal energy as an excellent source of energy for meeting base load energy demand due to constant availability as opposed to other renewable energy sources such as solar and wind. The third, the sustainability of geothermal energy for both centralized and decentralized power generation, however the resource is available. Fourth, the increased technology investment in the geothermal energy enables more resource can be harnessed and the cost driven down. Fifth, the use of the geothermal resource for a wide variety of applications, including electricity generation, heating, cooling, greenhouse, and others. Esteemed bilateral and multilateral partners, ladies and gentlemen, there are currently many institution programs and initiatives at the global and regional level that are making significant effort to promote the development of the geothermal energy and also mitigate the barriers of its development, including institutional, legal, technical, and financial barriers. Based on this observation, the minister responsible for energy from initially 11 African countries, namely Burundi, Comoros, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia, called on the African Union Commission to play a role on harmonization and coordinating the exploration of the development of geothermal energy in countries along the large East African geological fault. These countries harmonize their decision by signing the Addis Ababa Declaration on Geothermal Energy in June 2009, giving birth to the Geothermal Risk Mitigation Fund, commonly known as GRMF. Since the beginning of 2020, Somalia became the 12th GRMF eligible country. Indeed, GRMF with a total budget of $115 million was created with the support of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, the EU Africa Trust Fund for Infrastructure, ITF, through KfW, and the UK Fund for International Development, DFID. The overall objective of the facility is to encourage innovative financing, public and private sector developers, by providing grants and partial financing of three types of activities. First, 80% of the eligible cost of the surface studies. Second, 40% of the eligible cost for drilling, exploration, wells, and the testing of reservoirs. Third, 20% for the infrastructure upgrade, road access, electricity, and water supply. Since the launch of the GRMF in 2012, 5 successful application rounds for grants were conducted. So far, we have awarded grants totally of $117 million to 30 projects with the potential of 2,800 megawatts for planned investment volume estimated to $9.2 billion. This figure will increase when the ongoing 6 application round will be finalized in the first quarter of 2021. Despite these GRMF achievements so far, there still remains several challenges and the gaps that needed to be filled in order to accelerate the development of geothermal energy in East Africa. There are, among others, inadequate policy, regulatory and institutional framework, low level of financing, low level of technical skills, and weak geothermal information and database. In terms of the challenges of the policy, legal framework, and institutional capacity, we have observed inadequate policies and the frameworks that will boost geothermal energy development in Africa. Where such policies and institutions exist, there is a weak implementation of policies and regulation, thus leading to uncoordinated market and inefficient procedure, among others. We are also observed the need to create conducive environment for private sector participation. This requires policy and institutional that promote physical incentive such as tax incentive, feed-in tariff, and power purchase agreement so that we can attract investment in geothermal energy development. In terms of the challenges of technical skills, the development of geothermal energy in Africa is severely affected by low level of technical capacity and skills to build and maintain infrastructure that will enable effective operation of geothermal energy system. Thanks to the operationalization of the African Geothermal Center of Excellence since May 2018, that has been doing a great job by training the African workforce to fill these gaps. Despite all this encouraging initiative in Africa, I seize this opportunity that this is plenary session give me to encourage all AU institutions and agencies, bilateral and multilateral partners of the African Union Commission, as well as international financial institutions gathered here to invest both technical and financially in geothermal resource in East Africa, which still remain untapped. Ladies and gentlemen, in concluding my statement, I would like to reiterate the firm commitment and the support of the African Union Commission to accompany and the development of the geothermal resource in East Africa. I am confident that my appeal for harmonized and coordinate effort to invest in geothermal development in East Africa will have favorable response to the various partners present in this room. I thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atef, for your very enlightening keynote address. Obviously, you have touched on many topics and many challenges. So there is a lot of things that the audience will probably want to discuss on. But perhaps I will just want to ask one question to our colleague from COMESA. In the keynote address, Mr. Atef has shown us the very low power consumption per capita in Africa compared to other developed countries and regions. And this lack of electricity access, or the shortage, is costing the economy something like 2% of the GDP. So I would like to hear from Mr. Malama from COMESA his thoughts regarding this issue and what is being done to address this challenge. Mr. Malama, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Melako. And thank you to the panelists and to UNEP for the invitation to this virtual conference. So, as introduced, I'm coming from COMESA, and as most of you know, COMESA is 21 member states from Libya, coming through the eastern part of Africa to through Central and then to Southern Africa. And primarily, we want to promote trade within the region, but we also recognize that there are enablers that you need to address before you can get to that trade. So, Mr. Atef has given a very good presentation, very good overview of the energy situation in Africa generally, but I think that's also true of the region, specifically, the Eastern African region. And if you look at the figures within COMESA, even what we have as installed generation capacity, it's still low. Maybe as a region, we can compare with maybe one country. Let's say Germany produces more than all the region more than all the COMESA region, combined. And if you look within that, within what we are producing, you find that we are dominated by thermal energy, which constitutes almost close to 80% of the electricity that is generated is from thermal energy, and renewable energy only makes up a very small percentage. And within that renewable energy, geothermal energy is a very small it's a very small component of that. So from where we stand, we see the potential of geothermal energy within the renewable energy mix. And I think a lot of those points have already been highlighted, such as geothermal being a base load, but also I think it's the cost, because if you look at thermal, it tends to be more expensive. And from the side of geothermal, we can actually, use that to replace some of what we are generating as thermal energy from thermal. So we have a number of initiatives that are ongoing. For example, if it's within COMESA, we have some policy initiatives that are ongoing, basically to try to make the environment more conducive for private investment. So we've been supported through the European Union, and we also have some other upcoming initiatives with the support of the World Bank, and those will be aimed at specifically trying to help improve the policy environment within the energy sector. But when it comes to specifically, dedicated program on geothermal, that's something that we do not have as of now. But I know the African Union is doing a lot in that area. So what I can say for now is that geothermal has a role, and if we look at East Africa, the resource is quite rich, estimated at 20,000, maybe more than 20,000 megawatts, but the development as of now is only maybe 700 megawatts or so, with Kenya taking the lion's share. So it means that we still have a lot of potential for that. And I think we also see that if you look at the region is becoming more and more interconnected. There are a lot of interconnections that are taking place, and the region is basically preparing, to begin, energy trading. So it means that even if as one country you generate electricity and you cannot consume it, all of it, but there's still scope to share that energy, with other surrounding countries through platforms such as the EAPP or through the Southern African Power Pool, or even just through bilateral agreements. So there is scope for that. So maybe for now I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malama. I think you have raised very good points, especially regarding the benefits of interconnecting the power system among regional countries. I think that's very important, and it has a lot of benefits in terms of sharing excess energy, or when there is lack in one country, there could be an excess energy generated somewhere else. So that creates the efficiency in term, and probably I would like to invite Mr. Zelalem Gabrahiot from East Africa Power Pool to give us just a very brief background on what is happening at the East Africa Power Pool, when we expect to have the region interconnected, and the plans, everything about it. So I would like to invite Mr. Zelalem. Mr. Zelalem, please go ahead. Yes, yes, we can hear you, Mr. Dalala.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Well, regarding what the EAPP is doing right away, and when we expect the region to be fully interconnected, now we have a number of interconnection projects under construction, and also there are operational interconnectors in place since the last so many years. So we have a group of isolated interconnected countries like Libya, Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, Djibouti, Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, Eastern DRC, and Burundi. Now we have major interconnector projects under the construction, like the Ethiopia-Kenya transmission line. By the time it is commissioned, probably in few months, we have the region from Egypt up to Kenya is interconnected. Then Kenya and Uganda are also already interconnected at 132 kV11, and there is a new line also under construction, which is a 400 kV line with Rwanda. And Kenya, Tanzania also is expected by 2021. So in 1 year's time, we have all our members interconnected. So we are expecting full interconnectivity within the next 1 year time. And in the last 3-4 years, the EAPP have been engaged in the development of technical standards and commercial standards. The technical standards relates with ensuring a reliable interconnected system operation, because we have a number of countries interconnected, and unless each member countries comply to certain technical standards when they operate their systems, a problem in one country could easily be transferred to another country, and that will jeopardize reliable interconnected system operation. And that reliable interconnected system operation is the basis for efficient power trade in the region. So, generally speaking, we have focused in the last 2-3 years on the implementation of compliance programs, especially related to compliance to technical standards, which relates with connection standards, certain operation standards, just to avoid problems by the time we have countries fully interconnected. And that's in the technical side. And on the market side, we have been working on the development of instruments to promote bilateral trade, including short-term bilateral trade, and also development of willing studies to promote trade between countries which are not adjacent, for example, between Ethiopia and Tanzania. We have developed certain templates in support of long-term bilateral trading agreement, which is a pilot project to be replicated to other possible transactions between non-adjacent countries going forward. And on the other side, also to implement a trading platform which is a guide for centralized electricity trading. We have already developed draft documents, which are the draft market rules and also the draft market design. So we have been working on the market development side, which relates with promoting bilateral trade, developing the necessary instruments for bilateral trades for short-term and long-term between neighboring countries and between countries which are non-adjacent countries. So that involves the development of willing price and willing agreement to trade through the third-party countries. So I think let me stop here, and I will be happy to answer any further question on this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zelalem. I think we will come back to you. I'm sure there are questions both to you and Mr. Malala. Just a message to our audience. If there are any questions, please raise your hand and I will give you the opportunity. For now, I just want to pass the floor to Mr. My question is regarding energy mix, because we are talking about the role of geothermal in the renewable energy mix. I want to just hear your thoughts on how we achieve the right energy mix. And also if there are any, from what you know, from your experience, if there are countries who are now going in that direction, if you know of any, just so that we get an understanding of what this means. Thank you. Please go ahead, Mr. Zerubbabel.
All right. First and foremost, thank you for in this session. Thank you, Mr. Malala, for moderating this session and showing eloquent by Ataf and
sorry, Mr.
The first post.
I think
about is in Africa. Most of the in Africa are dominated hydro. Then the issue is due to several issues, including climate change. For instance, we can raise the issue of the dam crisis in 1990s. I will also raise the issue of the review of the Kenya-Uganda Power Trade Agreement that diminishes the amount due to overlands. And again, as you have listened to Mr. Zelalem, the cross-border interconnections in Africa, the Kenya-Uganda, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Sudan, Kenya, Tanzania, these are heavily reliant on hydroelectric power. But again, these are somehow there are recurrent blackouts and outages in East Africa. This shows the validity of hydroelectric. So the always regional approach is argued for to these problems. For instance, if you consider the East African region, it is rich with huge geothermal resources. and supplementing this hydro-dominated energy mix with geothermal capacities. It has got a lot of benefits. It minimizes climate change. Geothermal, the geothermal in East Africa, geothermal, but it's very
Hello?
I think that, let me try to reach it.
There's an internet problem.
Yeah, that is the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You can continue with others. Let me try to bring him. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Just to continue with our discussions, perhaps just one point on the keynote speak. Mr. Atif, you have highlighted a number of points in your conclusions, and one of this is the need for uplifting the capacity or capacity building in the region to expand the geothermal use and generation. In this regard, I just want to hear your thoughts, what the African Union and other development partners are doing regarding capacity building. Please, Mr. Atif.
Zerubbabel.
Is he back online, Dr. Nassim?
He back or not?
Yes, he's back.
He's back. Okay, I can wait and he can continue, and after that I will reply to your question, moderator. As you.
All right, thank you. Turn off the video. I think you're connected. All right. Yes, thank you.
Am I audible now?
I think you're doing better now.
All right. Thank you. All right. I don't know where I stopped, so I'm going to focus on the questions that are posed by the moderator.
Just give us very brief outlines, because we have heard that, I think, most of it, but just briefly try to summarize the point. Thank you.
All right. So when we consider geothermal in the regional energy mix in Eastern Africa, like most of the developments target national energy markets. But if the geothermal potential is fully utilized, it could be one of the source of energy for regional markets in East Africa. For instance, if you consider the geothermal generation in Kenya, it boosts Kenya's electricity export to Tanzania from 26.9 million kilowatt hour to 40.6 million kilowatt hour. So this simply shows the significant role to be played by geothermal if it is properly utilized. And the regional institution, that is the East African Power Pool, in its master plan, it has given geothermal a fair outlook. And the master plan study recommends a plan compromising both hydro and thermal systems. In the short term, I think the Plenary recommends the energy mix, including 5,000 megawatts of geothermal power before 2037. Therefore, from this, what we can observe and understand is there is an increasing understanding that we need to embrace a regional approach to solve energy issues in Africa, and institutions such as the African Union and the regional power pools are starting to play a crucial role
in addressing this energy challenge. And East Africa, as I said earlier, with its huge potential of geothermal energy resources, it can really solve its energy problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zarubabel. We now continue to Mr. Atif to make some remarks regarding the previous question.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus, moderator of this session. Regarding to the support from the African Union in the capacity building, the African Union organized on 2018 organized a training collaboration with the African Energy Commission based in Algiers, Algeria, to represent from each country from the East African countries. Means that 11 times 2 is 22, and 33% of these 22 experts are women, and to support also the gender equality. And this is received the training fully covered by the African Union and in cooperation with UNEP and at the Excellency Center for Geothermal Energy based in Kenya, and they received the first course on geothermal energy. And also would like to highlight in collaboration with the African Union with New Zealand is named African New Zealand Geothermal Program. Also they support a lot of program for the development capacity of the East African countries, especially some countries supported by New Zealand. They organize a lot of training at the Geothermal Excellency Center in Kenya. And also the African Union only not support in the area of the capacity and the area also for the resource mobilization, area of policy, area of coding to support the technical issue. On the main objective of this one to bring most of the African countries at the East Africa we at the same level as the geothermal. All of us are aware that Kenya a more advanced country in the region, and we try to coordinate with Kenya to improve the capacity of the African experts in the East African countries by exchanging the experience, awareness creation. This is that African Union mandated to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Atif, for your very good comment. Perhaps I will like to go back to our panelist from COMESA. I think earlier we discussed about the benefits of interconnecting the power system and sharing power among neighboring countries. I just want maybe you to give us a bit more elaboration on the benefits of joint development of projects in terms of reducing costs and increasing efficiency. Mr. Malama.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. As the regional body, I think one of the things we want to see is for countries to work together in developing their resources. And I think to some extent we have seen this in power interconnectors. I think there are quite a number of examples where countries have come together, to jointly develop projects. And I think we've also seen this to some extent in maybe hydro, where these resources are shared. And we can give examples. If you look at Rwanda, Tanzania, they are developing some joint projects. If you look at Zambia and Zimbabwe, they are also trying to develop joint projects. But when it comes to geothermal, I'm actually not aware of any example, where this has happened. And given the high risks, the high initial risks that are associated with geothermal energy, I think this is something that could be, considered, and also considering the fact that geothermal resources, they go across borders, basically, So the high cost of, for example, exploration, those I think those are resources that could be shared, so that if you want to determine a resource, maybe in some border area or something like that, that's something that could be jointly done, so that even if you don't find the resources, the amount of money that you have lost is significantly lessened by pulling resources together. So I think that's what I want to say on that. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Malama. I think that was a very good point. Perhaps regarding the risks, especially the financial risks and the high upfront costs, maybe just to make a point, one of the facilities initiatives in the region is the GRMF, Geothermal Risk Mitigation Facility, which is basically providing grants of up to 40% for drilling projects and 80% grant for surface studies. I think that is a very good mechanism to de-risk and encourage developers to participate in geothermal. But it's very interesting to also note that geothermal is not just used for electricity, but there is a lot of excess energy in the maybe the byproduct of electricity, the hot water or the brine, which could be used for various direct use applications. For example, for greenhouse heating or aquaculture or developing other touristic ventures. So it would be very interesting to hear any thoughts on this, just to make geothermal projects attractive in terms of cost. So I would like to open the floor to the audience, and we are happy to accept any questions from the audience. Are there any questions?
Question from Banis.
Yep.
Yes. Bernice.
Yep.
Please go ahead.
Okay, I was asking. Okay, let me go to the city. That's what's interesting. Okay, I was asking. This region is usually hypervolatile. Even now, you can see people are still surrounding over me here because they think I'm coming to take their resources, and my project is in Embu County, Kenya, Mount Kenya region. How do you deal with that as UN?
So your question is addressed to the panelists.
All panelists, if you have like solutions, because at least UN, you have like mechanisms to cope with that and also overcome that. Because usually, like, there are policies developed, but they are not implemented. A lot of corruption, a lot of tribalism, a lot of political influence, money influence,
Okay. I think I will first give the chance to the panelists to react, but if not, I can make comments, although I'm not qualified to. Panelists, are there any comments on the question? Okay.
Mr. Moderator, would you? I think I missed the first part of the question. If you maybe you could repeat it. The first part,
Yeah, let me repeat it. the region is usually quite volatile, especially like now we are going to the referendum, we are going to the next general election. It's usually very volatile. So how do you deal with that? How do you overcome that so that you can be able to implement such projects in such a region? Especially in the Rift Valley, in Kenya, DRC, Uganda, yeah, such regions, South Sudan.
Okay. If I understood your question correctly, I think you are asking how to deal with local regulatory issues or local laws. Am I correct? Hello? Yeah, anyway, I think one of the recommendations also in the, I think the keynote address was for regional countries and decision makers or policy makers to have a geothermal friendly laws. I think one of the things maybe the most essential thing to develop, to progress the development of geothermal in any country is to have a very friendly regulatory environment, an environment that attracts geothermal developers. It could be tax incentives, also having laws that is easy for developers to acquire licenses with all the the necessary controls in place, of course. But these are something that needs to be addressed by regional countries, their governments and decision makers. So it's a little bit, I think, outside our topic we are discussing at the moment, but I think it is a valid point, but it needs to be addressed on a policy level. I think that's my view. Are there any comments from the audience?
Maybe just a comment, Chair, on the same. I think she's also, from my understanding, it's a question of how you handle one part of it, like how you handle projects in regions that are fragile, and I think that's a very difficult question to answer. Unless maybe if you have actually project developers that have done projects in volatile regions and the mechanisms that they've used to cope with that. So it's a difficult question to answer, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe insurance could play a role, but obviously that would drive the cost of the project up, because if the region is volatile, it means even if the insurer is willing to give you insurance, the premium is going to be higher than normal. So maybe that's what I can say on that, but it's a difficult question, I think.
If I may.
I think, please.
All right. Thank you very much for the question. Actually, the issue of security and cross-border energy projects, they do have a cyclical relation. For instance, so far, instability has been identified as one of the challenges of the energy sector in Africa, especially in the Horn of Africa. But embracing the regional approach to addressing energy challenges in Africa also will somehow contribute towards the stabilization of the region. For instance, if two countries are engaged, for instance, in a cross-border energy project, it means that they will invest a substantial part of security to protect the infrastructure, leading to peaceful coexistence. Therefore, I think this is in line with what the liberal peace theory advocates in general. with cooperation and interdependence, there comes what? Stability and peace. And this is exactly what happened in Europe, because in Europe, the European Union started with a coal and a steel cooperation, which is basically energy. Therefore, energy has a potential to not can be affected by instability, but also has the potential to address issues of insecurity and instability in any region in the world. And I think it will also somehow contribute towards the stabilization of the Horn of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We still have plenty of time to accept questions from the audience. If there are any, I think I will first. Anjali.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Anjali.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity you've given me at the moment, especially for this amazing panel regarding geothermal development. My question actually goes to the general panel, especially I think just the general panel regarding the progression of geothermal in the region. Coming from Zambia, which is at the edge of the African Rift Valley edge over there, the main question I'm actually asking is predominantly coming from the southern part of Africa. Over the years, we have noticed that there is a lot of support coming for geothermal production, especially including training, predominantly focused on Kenya and Ethiopia. With the industry players we have actually interacted with, especially from the private sector, there has been a slight concern that many of the resources, especially from other cooperating partners, are predominantly directed towards Kenya and, of course, Ethiopia. Going forward, we wanted to find out, because we have hot springs from Zambia all the way to South Africa, on the southern part of Africa, because predominantly Argeo is focused on the part of East Africa, but we wanted to find out how you can actually start increasing support for the southern African part of the continent, where, of course, clearly when it comes to capacity, we lag very much behind our peers in East Africa, and also in terms of opportunities, we lag very much behind. So I wanted to find out from the panelists on how you can now extend the olive branch to make it much more bigger and broader, especially the fact that in Southern Africa, we predominantly actually take the route of private sector taking the lead rather than the government, like the way it is in East Africa, where the government actually takes the lead going forward. So I just wanted to get your response towards that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anjali. I think your question is valid. It's a very good question. But perhaps maybe I think I would like to ask first maybe to Mr. Atif to comment on that, and also Dr. Massaret, who are more familiar with this. I can also make some comments because it also relates to what I'm doing. But initially, Mr. Atif, please, can you respond to the question? Thank you.
Thank you, moderator, for this one. Regarding to this question, I'm speaking. I briefed it a lot during my speech for this one, that the African Union, they are supporting in a lot of areas for the geothermal energy to improve and to exploit the potential in the region, and also to attract the private sector to invest in the area of geothermal energy in the East African countries. The African Union also support technically, as I mentioned, and also politically, we have a declaration with the African countries to increase, also to bring more countries. This year, Somalia became eligible countries, and now the countries became 12 countries to support this one. We are planning to organize this year, but unfortunately due to pandemic from COVID-19, to organize like resource mobilization forum to bring our partner to increase the budget or to increase the fund to support more projects in this area. We have 5 applications already launched, 30 projects. Now we are working on the 6th application round. This is all that African Union, and also in the some of the capacity drilling code, we already launched drilling code and survey. We did a lot regarding to development geothermal energy in East African countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atif.
Yeah.
Do you? All right, Dr. Maselda, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Anyeli. It's a very good question that you raised. But just to let you know, indeed, our initial approach was most of us, including the UNEP Argeo program, and then on that basis, even the risk mitigation facility of the African Union. I think when these projects and programs were initiated, we were actually only based on the information and related to the those countries that possess a high temperature geothermal system. And all of us, we thought that the resource is actually, it's in the East African rift system that extends till Mozambique, have a similar kind of, geothermal systems. But that is not the case. So actually, we call it the 2016 technical workshop. Really, we considered it as a game changer because we all recognize that the Western and Eastern branch have a different geothermal systems and a different geothermal methodology, and utilization has to be adopted. Since then, we are very much happy even to see now here, as of now, we are in the 8th African Geothermal Conference. We recognize that those countries have to be really incorporated in other, in this geothermal actually programs, regional programs. So on that basis, I think we are extending it even to the whole, not only even to East Africa, but to the whole Africa. There is no need, of course, it depends on the kind of resource we have, and it depends also on the kind of, application or, what we are going to do. But now, for us, just I want to tell you, and we just said it even in our steering committee. Initially, the UNEP Argeo program was only mostly restricted to the JEF funded, which was focusing only the 6 countries. Now we are extending it, and Anyeli, Zambia is very much included. Not only Zambia, the East African countries. We work with 14 countries as of today. But in terms of the direct use application, we are extending it. For the time being, Argeo works with countries Burundi, Comoros, DRC, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Kenya, Rwanda, Malawi, Mozambique, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia. But it doesn't mean that it will just stop there, including Somalia, which became our partly in this. They are also involved in the actually in the capacity building. So if we want to serve our continent, we will do that based on the resource, the capacity we have when it is related to geothermal. Yeah. But now for our direction particularly is we want to see how geothermal also can be hybridized with other renewable energy and contribute to the socio-economic development of these countries. Over to you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Maseret, and thank you also, Mr. Atif. Just to add to that, as both my colleagues have explained in detail, I think the training programs run by different entities are open to all Argeo countries. For example, with regards to our facility, the New Zealand Africa Geothermal Facility, we discuss with partners and we try to identify acute needs in terms of capacity building and prepare training modules. For example, if the training module is on reservoir modeling, we look at countries who have reservoir and well data that can be used during the training. So part of the problem has been only a few countries in the region have wells, geothermal wells, and geothermal well data. Yes, in the past, most of the beneficiaries of the training had been countries who are somewhat advanced in geothermal exploration. But we now have started looking at also, for example, direct use applications and exploration methods, which will include all countries. For example, the training we ran in August 2020 on slim hole drilling was had 11 participants from 11 regional countries, I think, including Zambia as well. So hopefully in the future we will open up the training, but you just have to note that it all depends on the type and nature of the training. So if the training is on engineering and then you do not have projects that are related to the subject, then it's not really beneficial for that country or institution. So that has been the challenge for us. Yes, I think Mr. Ratif, you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. I would like also to thank the organizer for giving this opportunity, and thank all the panelists. Thank you, and thank you.
You are welcome. Do we have any other questions or comments from the audience?
I think we are okay. Yeah, I can't see any hands.
Okay.
Maybe the key messages from your panelists, and we can close here.
All right, I think that's probably a good idea. If you have any final remarks, panelists, please, I think you will have maybe a few minutes each, and then we will close the session.
Yeah, you can call by name, and maybe if they don't have, my husband.
Okay. Mr. Zelalem from East Africa Power Pool, if you have any last remarks, I am happy to give you a few minutes, Mr. Zelalem.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I don't have so much to say, but maybe just to emphasize on what Zerubbabel have said on the need to use the regional market to ensure scaled up development of the geothermal resource in the Eastern Africa region. Because isolated operations prohibits integration of geothermal and other renewable energy generation plants due to possible curtailments, because geothermal is a base load power plant and it is developed by targeting the minimum load level in the system. So given the resource availability in the Eastern Africa region, there is a good business case for geothermal development in our region. So maybe to give some information, and based on EAPP's power balance statement, which is based on the national plans, by 2013, 11% of the renewable energy generation in the region is going to be from geothermal. But this could be enhanced if optimized at the regional level, and that we expect to incorporate in the regional master plan update, which we plan to do in to start doing in the next few months. So I think that's what I wanted to say. Otherwise, thank you, Mr. Moderator, and Dr. Masarat and UNEP for sending us the invitation to participate in this meeting. And have a nice day for all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Zalalam, for your remarks. I think, yes, we can talk a lot about the benefits of geothermal in terms of being base load. But I think this is a subject that could take a lot of time. Anyway, perhaps I will invite the next panelist, Mr. Zerubbabel, to give us his final remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marcus. My final point would be breadth. In order for Africa to achieve its development agenda of 2063, the role and contribution of renewable energy has to be recognized and should be given its rightful place in the planning and implementation of development programs. As Kenya successfully demonstrated, Eastern African countries can capitalize on the geothermal energy resource potential in the context of energy mix to boost access to modern energy and, in turn, their economic growth. A regional approach to geothermal energy exploration and development should be embraced, for it addresses significant constraints to the sector. In light of this, regional institutions such as the Eastern African Power Pool should play a leading role in incorporating geothermal energy potential into its master plan, as well as forging the much-awaited regional energy market for the development of not only geothermal energy, but also other energy sector in general. Also, regional financial institutions should develop innovative solutions, innovative financing schemes to solve the investment bottleneck so that untapped potential of geothermal in the region can join the energy mix. I'm glad that I heard that APP will launch a new master plan study or an updated one in a few months, and I'm sure the geothermal will be well captured. And I'm glad that I shared this panel with all of you, Atef, Zelalem, as well as Malema. Thank you, UNEP. Thank you, Dr. Masar, for creating this platform, this opportunity. And thank you, moderator, for excellently facilitating this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Zalalam, for your remarks. Finally, last but not least, I would like to invite Mr. Malama to make final remarks. Thank you.
Moderator, I think just to say that geothermal is a resource which is there, and I think we need to pay more attention, dedicate more resources to the development of geothermal energy. In my earlier remarks, I'd talked about the composition of the electricity mix in the region. That is, when I say region, I'm talking about the COMESA region. So we have almost 80% from thermal, and then which is obviously the price is not stable. It's expensive. Then second to that, we have also hydro, which makes about maybe 17% roughly of the electricity generation mix in the region. And now one of the big problems that we are facing is the issue of the climate change, which has a very big impact on the hydro potential that we are utilizing now. And I think we have, like, from Zambia, where I'm sitting, and maybe even in Kenya, I think we have had in the past very bad experiences when it comes to our reliance on hydro, you know. So for example, in Zambia, I think we had at a point where some of our plants could only generate maybe less than even 50% of their capacity because of lack of water. So I think geothermal has a potential to play a key role to play in the energy mix, because at least it's not so vulnerable, you know, to climate change issues as hydro. So those are my closing remarks. Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you very much, other panelists.
Thank you, Mr. Malema. I fully agree with all of you, moderators, regarding the role of geothermal, the positive role that geothermal can play in the region. I think the fact that geothermal has high plant capacity, as seen in Kenya and elsewhere, geothermal can run at 90% or even more capacity factor, 24/7. That means that it is reliable. Also, it's not affected by weather changes in weather pattern. As you know, many regional countries face droughts, shortage of rain and water. So geothermal actually can play a very important role in the development of the region. I think it will play significant role in the total energy mix. Therefore, there's a lot of benefits in developing geothermal. With that, I would like to conclude my remarks. If the organizer, UNEP, Dr. Massarat, has any comment, I will give the floor to Dr. Massarat for a final remark and to close the session.
Thank you, Marcos. I think I don't have further things on this. We are very much happy that we brought this session because it is very much crucial for this region, because most of the countries that really possess this high geothermal resource potential, they don't really consider it, and they just focus only on hydro instead of diversifying their energy resources. But the scenario is changing, but it's good really to hear, particularly from Zelalem, from East African Power Pool, and as Zerubbabel said, unless it is in the context of, at country level, in the National Power Development Master Plan, and when it comes to the region, in the Regional Development Power Master Plan, it will be really difficult to bring it on board along the line. So it is good to know this and to really see the contribution of geothermal as a base load, and also in some cases that can be discussed as a peak load. But we can really see in the future, and it's good to know how it is considered in the region in terms of the regional integration and its contribution to energy mix. Having said this, I really thank Mark, yourself, and the panelists, Mr. Atef Marzouk from African Union, Mr. Zelalem Gebrehiwet from East African Power Pool, Mr. Malise from COMESA. This is really a very good thing which we have to really proceed, and the participants really diligently following up this discussion, and we are very much grateful with this, challenging times to be with us and to discuss this and to contribute to this continent in the name of my organization, the United Nations Environment Programme, and also in the name of the whole organizing committee, the government, the host country, and others. We thank you for all these very good 3 sequential plenary sessions. The housekeeping, what we have is we will start our 5 parallel technical sessions in the afternoon. My colleague Ryan has already shared with you all the links to access that. We will start at 2. Those of you who are able to connect, we have different topics on direct use, on the capacity building, on geochemistry and country updates. You are very much welcome. You can see on the program, and we thank you so much. Lunch is ready in our East African time. It's lunchtime now. So just have your lunch break and let's see you after 1 hour. Thank you very much, really, for gracing our virtual conference. You really made it possible for us. It was really difficult, just for us also, just a bold decision, but we are very much happy and blessed, with your attendance. Thank you very much. Thanks, Marcos, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a nice lunch.
Yeah. Have a nice lunch, and you can, the link is there. You can go from one session to the other the way you want to, and based on, your interest. And we hope that there will be a very good discussion. Apart from that, for all of you, we have a business-to-business platform. Don't forget also to visit our exhibitions, virtual exhibitions. They are existing. They are waiting for you. You can really see and visit. Actually, there are different, you can see in the exhibition platform that even if you need some interaction, you can put it there. The business-to-business platform will be also open. You can just send us. We can arrange any kind of meetings. Yesterday, we launched the African Women Advancing Geothermal. It's there. We have a virtual launch there. If you need a meeting, we need your close support from you. Any company or private developer who really spend maybe in Ethiopia or any countries, we really want to be there and to cooperate and just with you to help the communities. So I think see you later, and also maybe in the exhibition and the poster session later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, the session is over. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.